The CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by CyberEars. If you are serious about your podcast hosting needs, you should check out CyberEars. Whether you are a podcaster, a radio host, a musician, a narrator, an audiobook author, or simply a school, church, corporation, or anyone else with an audio recording that needs to be hosted or distributed, you should check out cyberears.com. Unlimited bandwidth, fast, reliable, and rugged servers with no hidden fees. CyberEars, your audio, your terms.
Listen, it's getting closer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet? Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
You're listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, a delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information featuring the Tandy Color Computer. Okay, welcome back. This is the first CoCo Crew episode for 2016. I am John Linville.
And Neil Blanchard.
And we are the CoCo Crew. Very exciting time. The new year's upon us. And that means CoCo Fest is just around the corner. By the time you hear this, it should be just about 3 months away. Or if you've been listening to the podcast, you know the CoCo Fest is a big thing for us and a big highlight of our retro computing year. And a great time to get together, enjoy the company of other CoCo nuts, do some fun stuff. And I hope with all these CoCo Crew episodes that we have convinced a few of you that going to CoCo Fest is something you should do too. I definitely have heard from a few people who seem to have been converted to that way of thinking. I hope to hear from more as the time goes on. And most importantly, I hope to see a bunch of you there. And like I said, I've said this before, but I am hoping that we get so many new people in that we blow the doors off the Heron Point Convention Center there. What do you think, Neil?
Absolutely. Call the security. That's perfect.
Call in the fire marshals. We'll have to spread the event out into everybody's rooms at the hotel.
The other thing to mention, even if you're just new to the CoCo, it's still a good event. You know, you don't have to be a longtime CoCo user. Yeah,
it's a cool event. You can come out and see what people have been doing with their color computers. You can reminisce, experience some nostalgia. You can see people have their bone stock setups from the past, running stuff off of floppy drives and or even off the tape sometimes. You can see people running with the newest hardware for the CoCo, doing cool stuff. Anyway, it's a great event, and I really, like I said, if you've been listening to this podcast, I'm sure you already know, but I think it's a great event, and I really want to see all of you there. Speaking of CoCo Fest coming up, Neil, how are you going with your projects? You making progress towards some CoCo Fest coolness?
No, unfortunately not. No, I got to get back into it. 3 months is coming pretty quick.
Yeah, so, time's a ticking.
Took a little time off there for the holidays, sampling some warm weather in Florida. So it's back to project time.
Yeah, somebody's going to have to come up there and crack the whip on you, I guess.
That's right. Also busy following other people's projects too, which is kind of cool. You know, a lot of new games being developed, and
yeah. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. I think we're going to cover some of that in the news in a bit. As many of you might know that follow the podcast or follow the group on Facebook, I've been engaged in a project with the Retro Challenge where I'm doing a port of my Xmas Rush game that I did for the CoCo around Christmas time, and I'm porting that over to the CoCo's little brother, the MC10. And so that's been taking a fair amount of my retro time over the past couple of weeks, and probably will for another couple of weeks. But that's a lot of fun. It's cool stuff. I also did a little work on schematic for something that Neil and I are probably going to be working on for CoCo Fest. We'll see where that goes. I'm learning a new tool there to hopefully turn the schematic into a printed circuit board. I don't like to pre-announce stuff too much, so just say we're working on something, and hopefully we'll be able to get something out around CoCo Fest. And there's always a few little projects here and there that hopefully will come to fruition. One thing that I've been wanting to do for a long time is have an arcade cabinet or a mini tabletop arcade cabinet with Farfall in it. I've got the cabinet built, but I need to find a way to mount a monitor in it. Haven't quite got the solution on that problem yet. So I'm not sure if that's going to make it for CoCo Fest or not.
Wow, that's
cool. Yeah, I think that'd be kind of cool.
Are you thinking of mounting a CRT in there or LCD?
No, it'd be an LCD. The cabinet that I got is kind of pretty much a DIY kind of affair. It's just sort of a box in there. There's no monitor mounting in there, so I've got to bend some sheet metal and get screw holes drilled in the right place, and then put screws into the side of the cabinet in the right place. And I don't know, it's just a lot of little things to do. And we'll see if I get there this year or not, but that'd be a cool thing when it happens. That covers what we've been doing. How about any eBay or other acquisitions? You pick up anything cool in CoCo recently, Neil?
Close to CoCo, I actually obtained a Vectrex. And,
Vectrex.
Yeah, and it's close to CoCo because, as we all know, it has a 6809 processor in it, and I acquired it from a fellow CoCo user.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, his name's Walter Maraglia. He's kind of new to the CoCo scene, and he was kind enough to sell me his extra. He had two of them. So if you're listening, Walter, I really appreciate that.
Very cool. Yeah, I've had a few acquisitions here and there, but a lot of it's been other things, still kind of retro in general, some old books or stuff for other computers. Although I did recently pick up a little package on eBay that included there's a lot of miscellaneous CoCo stuff, but the nicest one is one of these program pack files, which is the plastic case. It kind of looks like an old floppy disk box, like you'd have on your desk with floppy disk in it, except instead of the disks, it's got spaces for CoCo program packs. And these are kind of cool cases, and I picked up a few over the years, and I'd still like to pick up a few more if anybody's got them for sale. Don't sell them to Vincent Tran. He bakes them up into some kind of terrible thing to torture children or something like that. One way or another, you don't want him getting them. You want me to have them. No. Vincent and I have a little ongoing rivalry on getting these program pack files. We both like them a lot, I guess. Anyway, I did manage to pick one up recently, and I'm quite happy about that. And like I said, I'd still like to pick up a few more. So if you've got one, feel free to make me an offer.
What makes those things cool is that they're not only original and authentic from Radio Shack, but they do keep your cartridges clean and dust free.
Yeah, and it's a kind of a nice way to display them. And if you are trying to build a collection of them, and if you've got enough of these files to store the number of cartridges you have, it's pretty easy to put them in there in alphabetical order, and you can just look and see, oh yeah, I've already got that cartridge. It's cool, nice, tidy way to have your CoCo cartridges collected. But other than that, I don't have a lot of new acquisitions. Hopefully, I'm sure as the year progresses, there'll be a few more. Well, anyway, that's probably enough of an introduction for this episode. We'll be back in a moment with a few announcements. Okay, welcome back. And now it's time for us to go through a few announcements. First of all, we are on Twitter. We are at CoCo Crew Podcast. We are also available on Facebook as the CoCo Crew Podcast. This is our Facebook group. Feel free to reach out to us on either of those venues, and we'd love to hear from you. The podcast is available on iTunes. We're also available for streaming on through Stitcher. And if Google Play ever gets its podcast working, we should be available there as well. I'm not really sure what the holdup is there. It's couple of months back when they first got us approved, but I don't think they really have their service completely set up yet. You know anything about that, Neil?
It looks like it's coming because I see the link on my phone. It's
Yeah.
in there, but nothing happens. So
Well,
gotta be close.
hopefully it's coming close. Hopefully it's not something that they start up and cancel like some of their services have done. Anyway, the CoCo Crew Podcast is a member of the Throwback Network, which is a collection of retro-themed podcasts. If you are looking for other retro-themed podcasts, you definitely should take a look at the Throwback Network. The link is available in the show notes. Similarly, we are listed on the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. This is a similar list of retro-themed podcasts grouped by machine, with them primarily being retro technology podcasts, in this case, focused on retro gaming, of course. Audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted at Cyber Ears. If you are looking for commercial quality podcast hosting, you definitely should check out Cyber Ears. If you want to reach Neil and I via email, we are available at a number of email addresses. We are available as show@cococrew.org, podcast@cococrew.org, or feedback@cococrew.org. And if for some reason you prefer to speak just to one or the other of us, I'm available as john@cococrew.org, and Neil is, of course, available as neil@cococrew.org. Also, part of our announcements this time, we're going to continue our announcement of upcoming retro computing events. These are all things we've announced before, but until they happen, I guess we'll just keep doing that. The Vintage Computer Festival Southeast 2016 is happening April 2nd to 3rd of 2016. That is happening in Roswell, Georgia. In the past, they had numbers for these events, so I think this one should be 4.0. I'm still not seeing them using that kind of term numbering in any advertising for this event, so they may or may not call it VCF Southeast 4.0. Like I said, it could just be VCF Southeast 2016. It's a cool event. I've been to a couple of them. If you are in the southeastern part of the United States or nearby, you definitely should go and check it out. We're still following the Walsall Games Mart, which is scheduled to happen on Saturday, April the 9th, 2016. This is an event in the UK, which is happening in the town of Walsall, which apparently is in the West Midlands. There's a link in the show notes with that'll take you to their Facebook page, and it looks like they've got some cool retro gaming stuff going on. Given its location, I hope there will be a lot of Dragon folks that are able to attend, and I hope you are able to turn it into a all Dragon event. Something to look forward to if you are in the UK. For those in the northeastern part of the United States, there is the Vintage Computer Festival East 11, or Roman numerals XI there. So VCF East 11, that will happen on April 15th through 17th of 2016. So that's a 3-day event. The 15th, I think, should be a Friday. And so on the first day, they have a collection of seminars or classes, some more in-depth instruction or interactions. Whereas on the 16th and 17th, they're focused a bit more on the show aspects. It's a pretty cool event. It's held in Wall, New Jersey. So again, if you're in the northeastern part of the United States, especially in and around New York and New Jersey, you definitely should consider getting down to VCF East. And finally, of course, last but certainly not least, the 25th annual Last Chicago CoCo Fest will be held April 23rd and 24th of 2016 in Lombard, Illinois. This is CoCo Fest. This is our big event. If you are a CoCo person, if you're of any level of seriousness, then you definitely should try to find your way to Lombard, Illinois, in the Chicago area, and come and join us for our big event of the CoCo world. Finally, I want to take a opportunity here in the announcements to mention the ongoing Retro Challenge event, which is seeing an unusually high amount of participation from the CoCo community this time. I counted 4 of us that are CoCo people, and that includes Brett Gordon, who is working on actually a networking or a networked artillery game where he uses the networking facilities of DriveWire to communicate artillery shots using a IRC. So you can play CoCo versus CoCo artillery fire. It's a cool game. So that's Brett's entry. We also have Jim Gary's entry. Jim is working on various basic game ports. I think he has several underway, and it's not really unusual for Jim. It's sort of his thing, but he's concentrated them in a smaller time for Retro Challenge, so that's cool. We have Adam Green, who is a CoCo person. He's seen him in Retro Challenge, I think back in the summer. Anyway, he is working on, he's designing a CoCo cartridge that looks like he's got an actual ARM system on ARM as in a CPU, like the type of CPU that's in your phone. He's got an ARM-based system running on a CoCo cartridge. Not entirely sure what his ultimate plans are there, but it sounds like he's looking to have a pretty high-powered expansion pack of some sort for the CoCo. So that's looking cool. And of course, I am a participant in Retro Challenge with my MC10 port of Xmas Rush. So that is our Retro Challenge Team CoCo. I hope if you're not already aware of Retro Challenge, you will take this opportunity to go look it up, see who else doing what in the event, and cheer on your fellow CoCoists.
It's great to see all the CoCo entries in the Retro Challenge this year. Yeah,
it's cool. We're getting a little bit of critical mass there to get in and compete, and it's a cool thing. I'm excited. Anyway, well, I think that covers our announcements for this month.
Okay, but why Tandy Computers? In a word, quality. We do it all, from custom-designed semiconductors to the finished product. Tandy business computers are manufactured in our own USA plants. We test and retest and test again to ensure one of the highest standards of quality in the industry. And Radio Shack provides total service and support. I'm convinced.
Tandy Computers at Radio Shack Computer Centers. In business, for business.
Okay, now we're back with some news. Neil and I were just talking off the mic here that the news segment is, again, surprisingly large. I think it might be a little larger than normal because last month we recorded a bit early.
And plus with the holidays, maybe people have a little more time.
Yeah, people may have had a little more time to do some newsworthy things. That might be part of it. We're going to try to go through it. Hopefully we'll cover some reasonable stuff. Hopefully we don't miss anything. If we do, let us know. Our first news item is near and dear to me. We have a member of the community that's we've mentioned before, Stevie Stroh, who does he has a YouTube channel where he does a bunch of game reviews. And Stevie took the opportunity to do a review of my Xmas Rush game, and he did it with his daughter playing the game, and she was, I don't know, I'm guessing about 5. And it was adorable watching her play and comment on the games and take some serious consideration about evil snowmen and that sort of thing. Very fun. Stevie, I'm really enjoyed watching that, and I hope other people did. But so anyway, if you haven't had an opportunity to try Xmas Rush and you're kind of wondering, well, what is that game about? There's a link in the show notes where you can check out Stevie's review. Kind of along the same lines, there was a link to a YouTube video from Rogelio Perea. Rogelio is playing some music, holiday music that I think he was doing as part of Retro Battle Stations, which is another kind of retro event through Reddit. But so he has a link on. If you go through the link in the show notes to his YouTube video and watch it, then he has a link for Retro Battle Stations. You can figure out what that's all about. I think we'll probably also have a separate link for Retro Battle Stations farther down in the show notes. If you like CoCo music, holiday music, you should go and check out what Rogelio's done as a Frosty the Snowman. Pretty cool stuff. Did you enjoy? Did you take an opportunity to listen to that music, Neil?
Yeah, I was pretty impressed.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Has that nice 80s synthesized sound to it.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Pretty cool stuff. The next news item comes from James Jones. James is a very learned and serious kind of fellow. Remember him being at CoCo Fest for a number of years. Haven't seen him in a little while. James, I hope you make it back to CoCo Fest soon. We kind of miss you. But his news item was that there's a company called Rochester Electronics that has worked out agreements with both Freescale and Intel. Intel, I'm sure you're familiar with. Freescale, you may not be familiar with it, but Freescale was sort of a successor company to Motorola's, the part of Motorola, and in fact, particularly the part of Motorola that made microprocessors. So this company, Rochester Electronics, has worked out agreements with Freescale and Intel to bring various members of the 68000 and the ADC and ADC 188 family of processors back into continued availability. So on the Intel side, those are some reasonably popular x86 processors used in embedded work. The 68000 on the Motorola / Freescale side was also very popular for a number of embedded applications. It's also the processor that's used in the Macintosh and Atari ST and the Amiga, that sort of thing. Anyway, part of this deal, though, is it's not just the 68000, but it also includes the 6821, which of course is the PIA, 6840, which is I guess it's a PIT or programmable interval timer, the 6850, which was a serial port chip, and the 6809, which of course is a CPU in the CoCo, as well as a few other older chips. So the point being that some of our beloved old chips are still going to be available if you're dying to make some new designs. So that's pretty cool, don't you think, Neil?
I was going to say, definitely a good thing. I mean, even for spare, you want to have a backup.
Yeah, well, it's good to have them available just in case. All right, our next news announcement was entitled Orchestra Master version 1.1 for HTTPD DOS and the Drive Pack. So Orchestra Master apparently is a public domain application written by Dave Schuchen and Roland Knight. It plays Orchestra 90 files over the normal TV speaker or through the Speech System stereo sound pack. But the original application didn't use the DiskCon routine. That's the ROM call available in the disk controller ROM to kind of genericize disk access. And so basically this old program was doing the direct hardware manipulation on the floppy controller for its access to floppy disk. And the problem there being is that when you try to use it over drive wire or any other kind of hardware that isn't a floppy disk, it's not going to work, with the exception, of course, the SDC, the CoCo SDC. So Guillaume is announcing that a version is now available that does use DiskCon, and so you can use this Orchestra Master program to play the Orchestra 90 music over just over the TV speaker or over the Speech System stereo sound pack using drive wire or whatever. So good news all around, I think. You ever use this Orchestra Master program, Neil?
No, I haven't, but I was thinking about the different disk routines, and it makes me wonder why they did that. Was it for copy protection, or is it just their own way of handling it?
You know, it's hard to say. I really wasn't familiar with this program anyway. It may have just been because they knew how to operate the floppy controller and thought that was the easiest thing. I don't know.
I know for a lot of games, they used non-standard disk routine, but that was for copy protection.
Yeah, but in this case, it doesn't seem like that'd be a motivation, does it?
True.
So does anybody know... see, what is the guy's names? It says Dave Schuchen, or Roland Knight. If either of you guys are listeners to the program, feel free to contact us, send us some feedback. Tell us, why were you directly accessing the floppy disk controller in Orchestra Master? Doesn't make much sense to us. So that'd be interesting to know. Lost in time, perhaps. But our next news item comes from Tormod Volden. And Tormod is over on the World of Dragon, archive.worldofdragon.org, announcing what he calls I guess he pronounced that Sphinx 512 board. It says the Sphinx 512 board for Phuzix. And so basically, he's got a card that plugs in the ROM pack interface, and it includes an SPI controller, which is SPI is the hardware protocol used for talking to SD cards, among other things. So right there, it provides an interface for accessing SD cards, and then he's also got it where it makes 512K of RAM available on a Dragon, or presumably on a CoCo as well. Anyway, I stumbled across this and thought it was a cool project. Hadn't an opportunity to hold this hardware yet, but I am looking forward to the possibility. Experimenting with it. It might be a good reason to get involved with Phuzix. It might also be a cool thing to make available under Nitrous 9 or some other operating system, or maybe just make a hell of a game that makes use of the hardware facilities there. That would be cool. If you're interested in Phuzix or in hardware expansions to do crazy things on your Dragon or CoCo, you may want to check that out. I'd say in general, Tormod has been an advocate of doing crazy things on your CoCo and Dragon for a while. So I'm happy to see that he's continuing in that tradition.
And definitely getting up on that crazy game.
Crazy game. It's a crazy game that requires a Sphinx 512 board. A limited market perhaps, but maybe me and Tormod and I think maybe Brett Gordon is going to end up with one. So maybe the three of us we can make a fancy artillery game that maxes out the capabilities of the Dragon and does it over with networking and SD cards somehow. That'd be pretty cool. I don't know. It's a little crazy. Anyway, so the next item, this one I put in there, and it's not entirely. Well, in fact, it's not really CoCo related at all. But if you'll bear with me, I think maybe you'll understand. So there's this project that's been around for a while called the MIST FPGA computer. For some reason, it kind of hit the news splashes on some of my feeds. And I don't know if maybe it was just a sort of a onesie-twosie kind of proposition to get hardware in the past, but now it's easier to get, or I don't know. I don't quite understand. It was kind of a big news item. Oh, it's available. I thought it had already been available, but maybe it's just this particular one. Anyway, so the MIST computer project is basically an FPGA computer project, not unlike the CoCo 3 FPGA. It originally started, I think, as an emulation project for recreating the Atari STs, but then it got expanded out to being able to recreate at least the lower-end Amigas, the Amiga 500 and 600, that sort of thing. But then they've got extra cores for it. It can do a Commodore 64, or it can do the 8-bit Ataris, it can do ColecoVision, ZX81s, the ZX Spectrum, the Atari 2600, Sega Genesis, Apple IIs, the MSX machines, the Amstrads, lots of stuff, right? So my thinking is all that's really missing is, especially now that there's been source released on the CoCo 3 FPGA, is while there's nothing really stopping it from being able to run the CoCo 3 image on its FPGA. And one of the things that I think Nick Morentis in particular has been an advocate of is what we need is a box that you can buy that kind of looks like a computer instead of looking like, an FPGA experimentation board. Right? Well, this is it. This is a box. It's pretty plain. It's just a rectangular box, but It's got SD card slot and a couple of buttons on the front. It's got some USB ports and video, a VGA port. It's got a couple of joystick ports. So if you want a box that has an FPGA on it and kind of looks like a computer, this seems like your box. So that'd be my challenge there. If you're a CoCo 3 FPGA person, why don't you pick up one of these MIST FPGA boxes and get the CoCo 3 core running on it, and then we've got something, a machine that actually kind of seems like a computer that could do the CoCo 3 stuff. I don't know. It seems like a good idea to me. I'm not the biggest advocate for the FPGA stuff, but I'd love to see it be successful. This seems like a good way to me. What do you think, Neil?
I like the idea, especially that it's in a clean package. It's ready to go. I think if that happens, I'll actually jump in the FPGA world. That might bring me in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still have to jump in sometime, right?
Yeah, well, maybe. So anyway, there you go. The MIST computer is available through Lothar Tech, and Lothar Tech does a bunch of retro computer technology stuff. Some of it pretty cool. A lot of it's targeted more towards the ZX Spectrum or some other machines, but there's some cool tech out there. You should check it out.
It's also cool. I mean, I don't know if I should be saying this on this podcast or if I'm allowed, but I mean, the fact that you can run other computers on it too, right? So you can, if you don't have a lot of space, it's multi-platform.
Yeah, so you could dedicate most of your space to CoCo stuff, and then you have this one little piece of your desk for this MIST FPGA machine. And so even if it never did get a CoCo 3 FPGA port to it, at least you could run your Amiga and Apple and Atari and all that stuff on that one little corner of your desk, and then keep the rest of your desk for CoCo stuff. Yeah, that's perfect.
I think that's great.
Anyway, moving on. Next little item is from Hackaday, and it's still, again, not totally CoCo related, but maybe it's not that far away. So this is a teensy logic analyzer for a 6502. And so for those not aware, teensy is the name of an Arduino compatible board that fits basically in the size of like an IC socket, a traditional sized IC socket. It's basically a little AVR processor that in this case someone has taken and written some code to run on it, and so that it can act as a logic analyzer that then he's hooked up to the 6502 processor on an Ohio Scientific machine. The point being is if the 6502 and the 6809 from a hardware perspective aren't that far apart in terms of signals and speeds and that sort of stuff. So if somebody can do a logic analyzer for the 6502 with a teensy, then you ought to be able to do a logic analyzer for the 6809. So how about it, hardware folks in the group? It'd be a cool challenge, or it's really a microcontroller folks in the group, I guess. The $20 teensy and some wires and some coding and a little perseverance. It'd be a cool thing. So what do you say? Anybody out there for the challenge? But anyway, well, it's a cool project. Maybe somebody will be inspired. Speaking of inspiration, Jim Geary is definitely an inspiration to me. He is seems to be tireless to pick out mostly basic games from other platforms and porting them over to the CoCo or the MC10. They're usually first one, then the other. Jim recently announced to the group that he has a game that's called Fruit Panic that I guess he ported from the NEC PC 6001. I think that's also the known as the NEC Trek. That's a machine that has a 6847 video chip, although it's wired up a little more creatively than is done in the CoCo. But he ported Fruit Panic from there to the MC10, and he's announcing that he's now put a version of that on the the CoCo and the Dragon. Good job, Jim. It's great to hear that you're continuing to to just crank out these games and to support our favorite computers in the process. It's awesome work. Okay, our next item is from Bill Pierce, and the title is M-Shell File Manager version 1.0.30 as in Oscar update. So after 2 months of adding new functions, fixing bugs, optimizing existing code, and running tests with a few users, I think I finally have a fairly stable version of the M-Shell File Manager. So that's cool. M-Shell, of course, is a file manager that runs under Nitrous 9. It has the multiple panels, directory screen, point and click interface, that sort of stuff.
It's great to see this. Bill's put a lot of work in this program of his.
Good to see programs continue to be updated and maintained. Thanks a lot, Bill. I'm glad to see that continues to be your contribution in the community. It's awesome stuff. Okay, so the next two items are both from Lee Patterson, and they're both kind of related, so we're just going to do them together. So Lee Patterson is a fairly new person in the CoCo community, at least as far as somebody doing public things. I'm not sure how long he might have been lurking. So Lee has a new game that he calls Bouncy Ball, which I think may have been inspired perhaps by some sort of phone game, a mobile game. I'm not really sure. It's pretty cool. You kind of you have the player icon or whatever. It kind of just bounces up and down inside of sort of a maze, for lack of a better term. He kind of linked it to Xmas Rush in a way, saying that the snowmen have stashed away all their Christmas trees inside the maze, and so you're supposed to bounce around the maze and get the Christmas trees. So that's pretty funny. Anyway, it's a cool game that is in development. He's got a website set up with some blog entries and has posted some videos. It looks like a fun little game. Along the same lines, the second item he is taken on. So the game he's writing, he's actually using CMOC, which we talked about on several of our earlier episodes, which is from Pierre Sarrazin, and is basically a C compiler. Although it sounded like in the past, at least, it sounded like Pierre wasn't willing to really call it completely a C compiler. It's something a lot like C, is what it seems like. Lee is just pretty much saying it's C, so it must be getting pretty close. His second blog post, or at least the second one I'm mentioning, he had a graphic rendering routine that had been written in C for Bouncy Ball, and sounds like he was getting, about 15 frames per second of performance from his rendering engine.
That's right.
Which is okay, but it's not great. Normally you want to target 30 or even 60 frames. And so I guess he decided he wanted to try re-implementing his C rendering code as assembly language rendering. And at least on his first run here, it says that he got it running at about 26 frames per second. So that's pretty close to 30, which is what you'd normally kind of want to see. And then I think I saw a post earlier today from Simon, who Simon Jonason is apparently consulting with Lee on some of this conversion. And Simon said something about having helped him get it up to about 40 frames per second. So it's not surprising to me that converting C code, which C is a pretty good language in a lot of ways, but it's not surprising that some hand-optimized assembly code could still beat the pants off of it in performance, especially on an 8-bit machine. So there's a good reason to learn some assembly language if you do want to write some code for the CoCo.
That just gives me more motivation right there.
There you go. Anyway, so it's cool to see some new game development. Lee seems pretty excited. Sounds like he's going to try to go to CoCo Fest this year. He was talking about maybe doing some sort of shareware distribution on Bouncy Ball. He's trying to work out some details there. So we'll see where that goes. All right, so moving on. So there's somebody on YouTube that I don't actually know the person's real name. He goes by DRH OADS08. Dr. Hodes 08. I don't know. Is there a joke in that name somehow? Dr. Hodes 08. Hodes 08. I don't know. I don't know if there's some sort of funny pronunciation that's matches up to or not. But anyway, he posted which apparently he has a number of YouTube videos that he's been posting for a while. But he says, "Help me play in Quest of the Star-Lord on TRS-80 color computer." So I guess I don't know a lot about that game in Quest of the Star-Lord, but it's an adventure-style game from the past, like a text adventure, interactive fiction kind of thing. Is that right, Neil?
That's right. And I saw that
Yeah.
posting too, and unfortunately, it's a game I've never really played much. Or I don't think I've really played it at all. I've maybe seen it boot up once or twice, but that's it.
Well, there's a Help Me Play in Quest of the Star-Lord Part 2, so he must have gotten a little bit farther along. But anyway, it's kind of a neat idea. Post a video and ask for help on how to play. I see a few people participating in giving them advice. Some of them are familiar names. Most of them are not. I don't know. We'll see how that works out for them. But I thought that was kind of neat and newsworthy that somebody was trying to solve an old game and using the modern communications technology, at least, to help work it out.
For sure. It's always good seeing these old games being played again.
All right. Well, speaking of old stuff coming back, our good friend Ed Snyder, who is a guy who's been producing some cool hardware. He's the person that's currently producing the CoCo SDC hardware. He's produced a number of variations on composite video interfaces, both for the CoCo 2s and for the MC10 now. Ed managed to become the beneficiary of someone giving away an MM1, which MM1 was basically a 68,000 based machine. Actually, the processor's a 68070, which was not from Motorola, but was compatible with a 68,000 processor, software-wise at least. Anyway, it's a 68,000 class machine, so it's comparable in some ways to an Atari ST or an early Mac, that was designed to run the 68,000 version of OS 9, also sometimes called OSK. It's kind of didn't get a lot of attention outside of the CoCo community. It was sort of billed in its day as something like a CoCo 4, or at least a migration platform for CoCo users to move on to newer computers. A few people in the community have MM1s. There's not a lot of them. There never were a lot of them made, is my understanding. Ed managed to get a hold of one. I actually sent him some old OS 9 68,000 stuff that I had laying around cluttering my area. So hopefully he's enjoying that as well. But so Ed got inspired and collected some documentation on the schematics for the MM1's various boards, and he dumped some the ROMs and the PLD information. And it sounds like Ed has, I don't know if he's totally committed to it or not, but he was kind of declaring intent on reproducing the MM1. And so we'll see where that goes. And normally wouldn't include news on a pre-announced project, but this one I thought was interesting enough that we might all want to know that somebody's looking at that. A lot of CoCo people kind of have wondered about the MM1, what it was really about, and what they could do with it over the years. And so maybe there'll be a few more available for people to buy and play with. And we'll see. So, Ed, we definitely wish you luck on the project, and we're here to hear more as it progresses. What do you think, Neil? You're going to buy an MM1?
I'd be tempted. I mean, I missed out on it back in the day, so it's kind of cool to see what it's all about now.
Yeah, I've got one that I picked up at a CoCo Fest. Don't really have anything to go with it. It just sort of, I never really got a lot out of it either. It just kind of boot up to the firmware screen or whatever, and then just stare at me. It's neat to think that we had people building a machine to follow on to the CoCo. It's kind of a shame that it didn't really connect up with the CoCo or what Tandy had done. It was really an OS 9 follow-on more so than the main CoCo follow-on. You know what I mean?
Right. I think the big problem is, too, is not a lot of software support for it.
There's not a lot of software. I mean, it was OS 9, so whatever software would run on OS 9, but we're not talking about, you're not going to run PowerPoint on it, that's for sure. Or Microsoft Word or whatever, or anything really like most of those. So there's not a lot to do on them. There's some stuff, I don't know, the people who are really serious about OS 9 might be in a better position to make use of an MM1. Either way, it's cool to see a machine that's possibly going to come back from the dead. So the next item, this is out of the Dragon world. Again, the archive.worldofdragon.org. Got an email from Roland Schweiger. Rollo produces the Dragon multi cartridge, which is plugs into the ports and has a big EEPROM with some selector switches on it, so that you can have. Let's see. It looks like there's 64 8K slots, and they can be combined into some number of 16K slots. You can select whether or not they auto start or not. So basically, it's a multi-ROM cartridge that you can plug into the Dragon or the CoCo, and it sells around €35 for the base machine. For the base cartridge, maybe an extra €5 for a plastic Atari cartridge to wrap around it. So pretty cool. Do you have one of these, Neil?
No, I don't. I'm pretty tempted to get one because it looks like it does work on both the CoCo and the Dragon.
Yeah, it ought to. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it's simple stuff. It's not a software menu. It's just to click the switch to the right position and reboot. But that works, right? I mean, how slick does it have to be? It works and it does the job.
Oh, for sure. I mean, sometimes I prefer that when it's just hardware, dip switches versus software.
Yeah, nothing to screw up. Right. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. All right, so the next item. So L. Curtis Boyle, that's the person who maintains that awesome games, CoCo Games site. Clearly, Curtis has been around the community for a long time. Definitely, he's one of the masterminds behind Nitrous 9 in the beginning. That was the initial port of the OS 9 code over to supporting the 6309 that evolved into our current Nitrous 9, which is sort of the living legacy of OS 9. Anyway, he has some pictures that he dug up from back in the day. From it seems like most of them are from the Chicago Rainbow Fest 1988. So he has a number of old pictures of what Rainbow Fest was like, some of the hardware that was available, what was going on at the hotel, some different people, some cool 80s fashion. I think there's a picture of Steve Bjork in here somewhere. So a lot of cool stuff in there. If any of that sounds interesting to you, there's a link in the show notes, and you can go and check it out and enjoy that little bit of nostalgia.
Seeing those pictures on the holidays made me want to get a time machine.
Okay, so our next item is from Chris Martin. Yeah, so Chris Martin is doing a converter. So there's a piece of code out there from Robert Galt, I guess, that is an SG24, Semigraphics 24 picture display program, and then there's an editor. I guess if you can draw the pictures yourself with the point and click kind of thing. I guess I never really used it, but Chris had taken it on himself to do an image converter. To produce SG24 images. But he's having a little trouble. He posted about it on Atari Age and to tandycoco.com and also to the mailing list. He had some color matching problems, it looks like, and it looks like the file, his output format seemed to be off a little bit, whereas his images were shifted. So anyway, I did come in answer a little bit, offer some advice on what he might do. I haven't heard back from him since then. It's been a few days. But so Chris, if you're out there, respond to my response, and we'll see where we can go from there. Anyway, it's cool to see people trying to make use of the technology on the CoCo. I think a lot of people are interested in tools that will convert pictures to display on their CoCo. I've got some tools that do that, but I've never really packaged them out for just anyone to use, basically. And maybe that's could be a knock on me, I guess. But I think people would enjoy having some tools that are a little bit easier to just use and just, take a picture and run a conversion tool and then upload it to their CoCo. And so that looks like what Chris is trying to provide. I'm interested in see where he goes with that tool. What do you think, Neil?
Could be useful for game development too, I was thinking.
Yeah, it could be, depending on what pictures you take, and especially for like a background or something like that. Okay, well, the next news item is actually a post from Kip Kuhn on the mailing list, but he was just forwarding an email from another list where Martin Eberhard, someone who does a lot of work in the Altair and MSI, other S100 kind of community, actually bought an MSI machine from Martin. Really nice package came in. He not just that the machine itself was nice, but he actually provided a bunch of documentation and stuff he'd written himself and put into a nice binder or whatever. Very conscientious guy. Very impressed with him. And turns out he was also one of the initial founding minds behind the Tesla automobile company. Although I think there was some kind of drama that happened there later between him and Elon Musk. Anyway, I don't want to drag all that out, but so Martin apparently has announced that he's producing an EEPROM programmer that he calls the ME2700. It's apparently a standalone device that you'd upload EEPROM images over like a serial port or something, and then you'd be able to program a number of older EEPROMs, which includes not only the kind of standard 27 series EEPROMs, like the 2764 and whatever, but also the 25 series EEPROMs, which were similar but not quite the same, that were popular in a number of, they're popular on some arcade boards, and then also the 68764 Motorola EEPROMs, which were used inside the CoCo, as well as some other machines. So you may want to follow up on that, see if you can get, if you're interested in programming the ROMs for using directly on your CoCo motherboard or in your floppy controller without any kind of adapter. They're a little bit hard to get anyway, but if you do, if you're interested in using those ROMs or EEPROMs and don't have a programmer for programming them, you may want to follow up with the link in the show notes and see if you can get one through Martin.
I couldn't believe the list on that. I was reading through his manual and all the chips that supports. It was like a mile long.
Yeah, not bad. Okay, so the next item is another one from Bill Pierce, and he is announcing a release of VCC, the Virtual Color Computer Emulator, with the Becker port, which is the pseudo hardware used for interfacing out to DriveWire, version 2.0.1b, and in parentheses, final. So VCC had kind of languished, unmaintained for a number of years until not too long ago, and we discussed this on the earlier episodes where somebody managed to get the VCC author to come back and authorize releasing the source code to VCC in an open source fashion and putting it out on GitHub. But most of the GitHub releases, I think, have not really moved the ball very much. I think the first couple of releases really didn't change anything at all, and then maybe there are a few releases that have done pretty minor cosmetic stuff. So I'm not sure if we're at a point where anything significant is happening on VCC, but just the fact that people can build the code, I think, is good. And hopefully we'll get some fixes and or some some new features. I think some people are working on getting it to where it's not a Windows only thing. So I definitely would welcome that. I'm not sure what other features you want to add to it, but there's bound to be some usability things in there, and maybe tools for handling disk images or whatever. I don't know. I don't use VCC, but I'm sure there's any piece of software tends to have ways to improve it. And I'm glad that VCC is out there with the source so that motivated folks are now in a position that they actually can improve it. Do you use VCC much, Neil?
No, I don't use emulation too much, actually. I'm pretty much more of a real hardware guy. I think if I was coding and doing development, then I would use it more. But I've used it a little bit, but not much.
Yeah, used a little bit. Like I say, I don't really use emulators much. And since I'm a Linux guy, a Windows-only emulator doesn't do a lot of good for me. But
No.
but I know people do use it. And my main complaint against it was the lack of source code. Now that that's resolved, not too motivated to criticize it anymore.
It's going in the right direction now.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So our next item, let's see, this is from Roger Taylor. So Roger's been working on an FPGA project related to CoCo. He calls CoCo on a chip. So the title that I had here was CoCo on a chip becoming a CoCo 3. And so Roger basically he's been implementing, I guess he's implementing on a DE0, which is a kind of a lower end FPGA device. I think it's actually the same FPGA device that's used in the RGB to VGA adapters that are out there. But then he's got an add-on board he calls a Dewberry board that adds some CoCo ports of some sort. I don't know a lot about it. He kind of got to a point where it was mostly functional as a CoCo 2, and then he's started implementing CoCo 3 features on top. And so it looks like he's got it to where it can boot up. He's got a picture of a boot screen that says Disk Extended Color Basic 2.1, which of course is what the CoCo 3 says when it boots up on the Disk Basic. It's running his CoCoNet software. So anyway, it's pretty cool. If you're an FPGA kind of guy, it's definitely a project to watch out for. Either way, it's cool to see people getting their projects progressing related to CoCo. Okay, the next item comes from Kip Kuhn. Kip posted something on the mailing list. I guess he is inspired by a picture that Stacy Harper had posted on Facebook. It says, after looking at Stacy's CoCo 2 collection and reading the comment about a CoCo supercomputer, I remember reading about a cluster of Commodore 64s that were connected together into a supercomputer-like system. I've been wondering for a long while now about what it would take to create a CoCo supercomputer cluster, blah, blah, blah. Who knows how long this would take. Ultimately see all possible CoCo 1s, 2s, 3s, blah, 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 all wired together. I think this would be a very interesting project for the community as a whole. Has anybody else been thinking along these lines? And so then there was some discussion. A number of people chipped in. Somebody pointed out there's a project in the Apple world called the Apple Crate, I think is what it's called, that tied a number of Apple II motherboards together into a supercomputer-like system. It's not really a supercomputer in terms of it doesn't necessarily perform all that great, right? But it's like a supercomputer in terms of the architecture is parallel and has pass messages back and forth between machines or whatever. I would like to see somebody do something like the Apple Crate with a stack of CoCo 2s. That'd be a neat project to do. I don't know. So I guess in Kip's project, he was talking about Nitrous 9 changes and being able to tie a multitude of different kinds of computers together. And I don't know how realistic any of that is. it might be neat to see some highly parallelized computer stuff built around a CoCo. What do you think, Neil?
Oh, I think it's a cool idea. I've always had these visions in my mind of hooking up CoCos, through the bitbanger port and just, daisy chaining them all together.
Yeah. Problem with the bitbanger, of course, you're not going to get a lot of communications over it.
No.
So you'd probably need to devise some sort of hardware that runs over the cartridge port, would be my guess, if you really want something reasonably high performance. There's a principle in computer science for building parallel systems, and it's called Amdahl's law. It comes down to that it basically puts a limit on how much improvement you can get through parallelization. That basically says that your improvement is bounded by your capacity to communicate. And so if you hook a bunch of parallel machines up with really slow links, then you don't get a lot of benefit out of working on the job in parallel.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
It's the bottleneck. Yeah.
And so if you did want to build some sort of parallel system around CoCos, you're going to need to maximize how quickly they can communicate. There is some support for multiple CPUs in the 6809, but the CoCo doesn't really export that over the cartridge port. It might be kind of tough, is basically what it comes down to. You're going to have to run some flying wires between the machines, and it's not impossible, but I think it'd be difficult to get much performance out of a parallelized CoCo. That's just snooty old me with my fancy college degree throwing water on the cold water on the idea. So maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I am. Somebody can take up the challenge and produce something that just totally dumbfounds me. That would be awesome. What do you think?
Well, it definitely sounds like a good challenge.
So, Kip, I don't know how many CoCos you have. Maybe you can collect a stack of them and solder them together and produce a machine that can do live video transcoding or something like that. That'd be pretty cool.
And also, speaking of collections, you mentioned Stacy. Man, does that guy ever have a collection? Wow.
Yeah. Well, he definitely seems to go for volume. Yeah. He posts pictures of. He posted one today. I think he had it looked like about a dozen multi-packs.
I know. I saw that. I'm like, wow.
What are you going to do with a dozen multi-packs? I'm not sure. But just maybe he's like a variations kind of guy. So this one has square feet and this one has a different font on the label, or, something like that. It'd be, if that's the case, I would love to hear about that. I know when I went to Kansas Fest this past summer, 2015, there was one of the talks was on all the different variations of the Apple M0001 or whatever its designation is, M1001. Anyway, the original Apple mouse that was used on the Apple II and the early Macs, I guess, or maybe just the Apple II. Anyway, about how there's all these variations that are ostensibly the same thing, and he had all these pictures, and you'd look and there's different fonts in the labels, or some of them had the labels printed upside down, or they're basically like branding into the plastic or something like that. Some will be upside down, or there was one thing where there was a part number or whatever where it's supposed to be like I said, M1001, but it was like ML001 or something like that. There's all this crazy subtle differences between these Apple mice. So if somebody could do an analysis of multi-packs or joysticks or something for the CoCo that said, oh yeah, there's actually 23 different types of black non-centering joysticks for the CoCo, I would be amazed. That would be awesome, don't you think?
I know of two variations with the black joysticks for the non-centering. Yeah. One's made in Japan and another one's made in China.
Oh, really? Well, I know there were some that had metal, silver-ish handles and some that have black plastic handles.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know if that's the same as what you're saying or not. I think some of them have some differences in the button as well, but it's a subtle, it kind of just feels different kind of thing. But anyway, it'd be cool if somebody could zero in on some aspect of the Tandy production line and just, I know Boise can tell us a lot of differences on the productions of the CoCo 3, maybe some of the CoCo 2s. You can tell us about the differences with the Korean ones and the American-made ones and that sort of thing. But even those that's not the same level. I mean, that's there's 2 versions. Well, okay, there's 2 versions, right? But I mean, if there was really 47 versions, that might be fascinating, at least for me.
Oh, me too.
So if you're out there and you have if we've inspired you to tell us about some aspect of the CoCo collecting hobby that you can tell us about all the different variations of something, please come to CoCo Fest. Please sign up for a presentation slot. I would love to hear that, even if it's some ostensibly boring little thing about fonts on labels or slight differences in color matching or whatever. Please, I would love to hear it. Please show up and do that. So our next item is from Jim Gary, and so he sent an email to the list and says, my basic 09 and C source all up on GitHub now. For those of you not familiar, GitHub is a public repository for source code that makes use of the Git source code control tool that came out of the Linux community. So if you're a software developer and you want an account on GitHub, you can get it and make your source available, and anybody can download it. And there's mechanisms there for them to send you patches back for fixes or new features, track bugs, do all sorts of things. So anyway, if you're interested in what Jim's up to and what other things he's been doing or might do in the future, you definitely should check out his GitHub page. Our next item is from Ed Snyder. And Ed Snyder, also known as Zipster, made it known that he has more MCX 128 boards available. So what is this? Well, an MCX 128, if you're not familiar, is a design from Darren Atkinson, who's also the brains behind the CoCo SDC. But the MCX 128 is an add-on for the MC10, which is, again, the CoCo's kind of little brother machine. And it adds 128K of RAM available to the MC10. And it comes with some ROM extensions to the basic on the MC10 that both add some features to basic, some functions and stuff that were missing, and also adds the ability to talk to what's called the EMCE MC server, which is similar to DriveWire in terms of allows the MC10 to communicate over the serial port to a more modern machine, a PC, and have access to file storage and that sort of thing. Anyway, if you have an MC10, you probably should be interested in the MCX 128. Looks like the boards are available for about $30.
Yeah, the board looks really cool, and I got to tell you, the last 3 months now, all this MC10 talk, I really have to get one. I think if one shows up at CoCo Fest this year, I'm going to buy it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, they're cool little machines. I've enjoyed what I've been doing with mine. I don't know. There's some cool stuff to writing code for it. There's some really questionable design choices that were made in building it. We'll probably talk about some of those in the tech segment. But overall, it's an enjoyable machine to use, and it can do some cool stuff. Anyway, moving on to our next item. This is from Tim Lindner. Tim's, he's probably reasonably well known in a number of retro computing circles, and he's definitely been a CoCo person for a while. It seems like this is not the first time I've had seen Tim with some involvement with Marty Goodman. So he must be like a neighbor or have some kind of contact with Marty. Marty, of course, was a CoCo luminary from the past. He's well known in some of the CoCo magazines and for doing a variety of hardware and software hacks and that sort of thing. Tim says, Marty Goodman is looking to reduce his CoCo collection. He is looking for someone local to help. If you have the free time, he could use your help. Contact me and I'll get you in touch. So this is for California Bay Area residents. So if you live in and around San Francisco or that general area of California, and you'd be interested in helping Marty Goodman reduce his CoCo collection, this is your opportunity. I know if I lived out there, I'd probably be jumping on that because I'm sure Marty has some really cool stuff.
Yeah, I when I read that post, I was thinking anybody who lives in the California Bay Area, consider yourself lucky.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I don't know. I've visited the area. Can't say it's my favorite place to be, but a lot of people do like being out there. And in this case, it definitely would be a nice benefit to be able to have some access to Marty Goodman's CoCo collection.
And hey, you get to meet Marty Goodman.
And just to have access to Marty Goodman is probably a cool thing. Just try not to catch him during a sponge bath. That's kind of an inside joke, a reference to we used to have years ago. We had what we called a CoCo coordinated conference, which was kind of like a live call a conference call, basically every month or two that we did for a while. And one of them we had Marty Goodman and kind of come in as sort of a guest to be interviewed, and I think there was a line in there about somebody being involved in a sponge bath, or I don't know. I forget now.
That was hilarious.
It was hilarious, though. So we mentioned Brett Gordon as a participant in Retro Challenge earlier, and Brett, who goes also calls himself Beretta42 at gmail.com. Posted a link to his Retro Challenge project. It says demo video sound effects. So he has a demo video of his, it's a networked CoCo artillery game. And so you can check it out. It's kind of a cool project. Like I said, it makes use of the networking facilities in DriveWire, which is fairly underutilized thing, I think. So it's cool to make use of that and do some cool stuff. So there's a link in the show notes. You should go and check it out. I don't know if this was ever really announced or whatever, but a couple of nights ago we had the Glenside Color Computer Club planning call for the upcoming CoCo Fest. And one of the participants there is Bob Schwoger. And Bob was kind of the man behind Logicall, which is a tool that's been talked about in the community for a while. Quite a bit of the talking comes from Bob, of course. But anyway, it's a cool little utility that kind of helps you make use of your CoCo. It kind of is sort of like a file manager and sort of like a program launcher and a couple of other kind of shell sort of functionalities built in. To go along with that, Bob has been maintaining a collection of disk images that I think is set up for running with the VCC emulator, and then launching into Logicall from there. And then he calls this package LogiCoco. And I guess there's been a new release of LogiCoco fairly recently. I noticed that it includes a disk image for Xmas Rush, so it'd have to have been basically since Christmas or maybe just before Christmas. So if you are a LogiCoco user, or if you want to be, you may want to check out the link in the show notes and grab that zip file and give it a whirl. All right, moving on. So Barry Nelson posted something that's kind of interesting. Again, we're talking a lot of MC10 stuff. Maybe it's just because I've been had my head stuck in the MC10 world a bit deeper than usual this month. But so the MC10, it runs by default Micro Color Basic, which is pretty similar to Color Basic, but not necessarily. I don't know if there's anything like extended Color Basic in there. I think it's more like just unextended color basic, right? Anyway, it's a pretty familiar environment, though, if you're programming in BASIC on the CoCo. But one of the things that's sort of missing, there's a C-save command for saving your BASIC programs to cassette. Fine. But even though there is a C-load, there's, of course, a C-load command for loading programs from cassette. There's also a C-load-M command for loading machine language programs from cassette, which you would do for like the microcolor compact or the MC10 pinball cassette or whatever you could get from Radio Shack. But there's no C-save-M command on the MC10. The CoCo has one, but the MC10 did not. So I'm not really sure, what they did for making those tapes in the first place, and it certainly probably discouraged a lot of third-party development, I would guess, not having one. But maybe they just figure if you know how to write code, you know how to figure out how to write a save routine. I'm not sure. Anyway, so Barry figured out how to write a basic program to do a C-save-M operation on the MC10 and posted that to the CoCo mailing list. It's not all that complicated, so it wouldn't be too hard to type in if you wanted to do it. Basically sets up some pointers and does an exec or whatever. Anyway, it's a cool utility, kind of adds something that was missing from the MC10. So if you are a budding machine language programmer that wants to cut your teeth on the 6803 CPU used in the MC10, this might be an option for you.
Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't have the C-save-M command. I would have assumed it was there.
You'd think it would be there. At least they had the C-load-M command. That's in some ways more important, I guess. But yeah, I don't know why they didn't have that. I think the format is pretty much the same. So theoretically, you could load code into memory on a CoCo and C-save-M that out, and then load it back on the MC10. But I don't know. Maybe that's what they thought people would do.
Yeah, that's a bit of a workaround, though.
Yeah, a little strange. Anyway, so we got one more item from Jim Gary. In one of his blog posts related to Retro Challenge, he talks about how, so this is just going to tie everything together here, Retro Challenge, Jim Gary, and now the MCX 128. He's using an MCX 128 card with his MC10. He has just a bare card, which is the way they come. But at some point he noticed that he had, in the course of doing some painting in my home over the Christmas break, I took down a sensor for a home security system, which we've never used and never intend to. We'll post Jim's address later. No, just joking. Anyway, I noticed that it is just about a perfect size and shape to cover my MCX attachment for the MC10. He says they sawed a centimeter slot in the bottom, and that's some sort of Canadian inch or something like that. I'm not sure. It's so that's what, 60% the size of a U.S. inch? Is that something? Sorry. A little vague reference to the exchange rates between the U.S. and Canada right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just sawed a centimeter slot in the bottom, and the MCX fit right in and easily plugged into the back of the MC10. So now instead of an old plastic package for screws, spray painted page, I have what looks like a legitimate case from a computer peripheral manufacturer. So he's got a picture in there. It looks pretty good. It's a nice little plastic case wrapping up the card plugged into the back of his MC10. So I don't know if this is a generic solution, but if you do have an MCX 128 and an MC10 and you want to look for a nicer housing for the 128, you might look around, see what old plastic cases you might have laying around that might fit it. All right, we're going to have our last news item here. And I think this is some good news. This is from Nick Morentis, and it says, the next installment of the Popstar Pilot game development blog is up. So Popstar Pilot has been a CoCo 3 game in progress, coming from Nick for a while now. Looks like the latest issue is Chapter 23, to give you an idea how long it's been in development. It's a cool-looking little game he's got in progress. I think we're all looking forward to him getting to a final release on this, but it's cool that he's doing the game. It's cool that he's writing up about the issues he's facing and some of the design choices he's making and that sort of thing. Very cool, very exciting, and I hope it means that Popstar Pilot is again coming to us.
I'm really excited about this one here. I've been following this blog for a long time, and I was kind of worried that he had mentioned it for a while, and I'm like, oh, I hope this project's not stopped, but it's good to see that it's going. It's continuing.
Cool. All right. Well, that probably wraps up our news for this episode. So we'll be back in a moment with some listener feedback.
Now, if there is any dedicated group of old computer users, it is certainly the people who still love their CoCo, the Tandy Color computer.
Okay. Now it's time for some listener feedback. Our first feedback item comes from Brian Blake. And Brian says, been listening to the new podcast. There's also a lot of CoCo 2 info here. http://www.tandycoco.com/coco2.shtml. That, of course, is a link to his Tandy CoCo forum site. I guess that specific link is not really part of the forums, but Brian runs a forum site there at tandycoco.com. It's got some neat stuff in there, some decent participation. I think maybe Brian's been a little disappointed as of late that it's not getting quite as much participation as he had hoped for. If you like participating online in a forum style of environment, I encourage you to head out to tandycoco.com, add a note here or there on the existing topics, maybe start your own. I think Brian would appreciate it. And anyway, thank you, Brian, for pointing out this source of CoCo 2 information. I think we had mentioned in the last episode that there was a couple of links that we mentioned there about how to identify different CoCo 2s and how to do upgrades on them and that sort of thing. So I think that's what prompted his response.
It's a very clean website if anybody hasn't been there. And it's nice to have another avenue other than social media and that sort of thing.
Yep. Our next feedback item comes from Michael Brandt. I think Michael mentioned that he was the person who had acquired a set of 24 eBay cartridges that I think maybe we mentioned in one of our previous episodes. Anyway, Michael says, I got back into the CoCo world last February, and it is nice to learn more about the CoCo's history and technical aspects. So, Michael, I'm glad you're enjoying the show, and we're certainly glad to have you back in part of the community. I hope maybe you can make it out to CoCo Fest and meet the rest of the community. And either way, we're glad to have you. Okay, so our third feedback item this month comes from Roland Schweiger. Again, this is Rolo. And in our last episode, I mentioned that there was an item from ROB CFG on the Dragon World of Dragon, the archive.worldofdragon.org. I didn't know who that was. So Rolo says that ROB CFG is Roberto Carlos Fernandez Gerhardt from Spain. It's kind of a very Spanish name with a very German ending. So anyway, Roberto Carlos Fernandez Gerhardt from Spain, a very active and capable Dragon user on the Dragon Archive. So, okay, great. Roberto, sorry I didn't know that before, but Again, glad to have your contributions to the CoCo and Dragon world. So let's see, Roland, he actually had a couple other things in here. Let me see if I can find his earlier note. He says, can you say something about the dimensions of the cartridge slots of the CoCo and Dragon? Do the CoCo carts fit the Dragons and vice versa? So yeah, he also said something about not the connector, because he knows that the connectors are electrically the same. The cartridge slots are the same, at least if they're not exactly the same, they're pretty damn close. I certainly can fit cartridges between the CoCo and the Dragon. The Farfall cartridge will work in both. In general, those two cartridges should be the same. Should not be a problem to from a hardware perspective or a case perspective to use a cartridge between the two. Now, there is a difference on the CP400, which is the Brazilian CoCo clone. That, again, the slot there is electrically compatible with the CoCo and the Dragon, but the actual cavity for holding the package, the cartridge, is different, and you will not generally be able to plug a CoCo cartridge into a CP400. And I'm not sure you could do the reverse either of a CP400 cartridge into a CoCo because of the way they shape the plastic. And I'm not sure why they did that. But it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. Not only that, if I'm not mistaken, I think I looked at this before. And I think even though electrically the PCBs are the same, if you wanted to wrap a piece of plastic around it, you really need I think maybe you need the PCB to sort of face to be turned upside down so that the chips are on the bottom instead of the top, or something to make the right amount of room to be able to put a plastic case around it. I'm not 100% sure on that, but they are a bit different. So there's your answer. The CoCo and Dragon cartridges are compatible. CB400 is sort of a beast of its own. He goes on to say, talking about new games, I published a converted version of the Commodore PET Basic program Target Pong a few weeks ago in the archive uploads. He says, absolutely ugly code, but he left it the way Commodore published it. He says, I don't know if a Dragon Basic program can be loaded by the CoCo. Didn't they shuffle the tokens? Yes, I understand that to be the case. But at least on the CoCo, you can save a basic program in ASCII form. And so it'll be bigger, but it's basically like just saving the text of the basic program without the tokens. And so then it can be loaded up. There might still be a few differences just because there are probably some subtle differences in the basics. I'm not 100% sure on that, but yeah, the tokens are different. So a program written in BASIC, you'd at least need to save it as ASCII and then reload it on the other machine. I hope we've addressed the questions Roland was asking. If not, I know Rollo has my email address. He can bounce back and ask me to clarify or ask other questions. Rollo, thanks for the email. It's great to hear from you. Okay, so the final piece of feedback actually is from Lee Patterson. We mentioned him earlier with his Bouncy Ball program. He says, I'm hoping to make Bouncy Ball available as shareware and have been thinking about the price for the registered copy. So I almost made this a host discussion topic. The concept of shareware in the CoCo community, I'm not really sure where that is these days. I don't know. I was kind of out of the CoCo community at a time when shareware was a bit more popular in the world, so I'm not sure how popular it ever was in the CoCo community. Maybe somebody could write in and address that. But I definitely have not seen shareware as a concept in the CoCo community anytime recently. How about you, Neil? Have you?
No, I haven't. And just like you, I was onto the PC by the time shareware was a big thing. So I can't recall ever seeing shareware on the CoCo.
So it might be a new thing. It might be something that works about great. I don't know. I can't speak for people in advance, obviously. I'm not sure what the logistics are of shareware in the modern world. I know he kind of had bounced back in some private email that he wasn't too interested in doing a cartridge, and he was asking me what I thought about options for code downloads. And again, I'm not really sure what he'll come up with on that. So I don't know. Maybe people want to write in and tell us what they think about shareware these days, or what's the best way to handle a download option that still preserves an author's ability to be rewarded for his code. I don't know. If you got ideas, if you do, send them in to feedback@cococrew.org. We would love to hear. And in fact, since this is our last feedback item, we'll just go on. Any kind of feedback you want to give us, whether we screw something up, mispronounce a name, just have a dumb idea, or if you have a great idea for something to do to get more people to come to CoCo Fest or to listen to the program or whatever you want to talk about, we're here. Again, you can send us feedback@cococrew.org. or John@CoCoCrew.org or Neil@CoCoCrew.org. Any of those addresses will work. Please feel free to reach out. You can reach out to us through Twitter or at the Facebook group. Just like I said, the audience is the reason why we do this show. We'd love to hear from you, know that you're out there and know where your interests are. So please do let us hear from you.
Well, good afternoon. And my name's Tony Pedraza, and I am the host of the annual last Chicago CoCo Fest. We call it the last in quotes because we really don't know if we're going to have another one.
All right, now it's time for our host discussion. This continues to be a popular segment, and usually we manage to stir a few people up. Sometimes it's just me and Neil that get stirred up, but either way, I think people enjoy hearing us bat around some ideas on things. And we weren't quite sure what we wanted to do this time, but then we saw a question posed on the Facebook Color Computer group from Stevie Ray Strobridge Jr., also known as Stevie Stro, the original gamer. Stevie is looking at joining us for CoCo Fest. Says he thinks he has his finances in order. He's pretty sure he's going to be coming, but he has some questions. And so since part of our whole motivation for having this podcast has been to encourage people to come to CoCo Fest, it occurred to us, well, hey, there might be other people who have some questions. Maybe we should address those, and maybe this is a good time to do it since we've only got about 3 more months until people start showing up. So let's see, going specifically to Stevie's question, let's see, should I plan on reserving the hotel for Sunday night? What's the hangout environment going to be like? What should I expect? Should I bring anything? Says he was thinking of bringing little cards that had his YouTube channel info on them, asking about a rental car. That's, I'm sure there's a lot of people thinking about coming to CoCo Fest that might have some similar questions. So I jotted down a few notes. If it's all right with you, Neil, maybe I'll just go through some of my notes and you can break in as you see fit.
Sounds good. This can help a lot of newcomers out.
Okay. So I'd say the first thing to do, if you go to the Glenside Color Computer, the CoCo Fest link, which is in the show notes, you'll get their webpage with their basic set of information. So the first thing is to tell you they have a special overnight room rate at the Fairfield Inn of $84 plus 11% for a total of $93.84. You must phone certain phone number. Let's see, 630-629-1500 and mention Glenside CoCo Fest to get this special rate. Not only that, so you definitely should do this, right? You should not only to get the special rate, which you might be able to get similar rates through, I don't know, AAA or whatever other kind of travel clubs you might be involved with, or you might even think you're just going to do the righteous thing and not stiff somebody else on the rate or something. I'm not sure what goes through people's minds. But the thing is that's part of their negotiation with the hotel or whatever, is to kind of guarantee a certain amount of rooms sold. And so you want to do this so that Glenside gets credit for your room. So it actually helps the club, make sure that you have told the hotel that you're with the CoCo Fest, right? So make your reservation the way it's described on the list, so the club gets the credit. You might also take the opportunity to let Glenside know that you're coming, which helps them with some planning, have an idea of who's coming, or how many people are coming, and also lets them advertise that you're coming so that it kind of encourages other people to come. If you're coming as a vendor, you should find the link on the Glenside page, which I'm not sure is there yet for 2016, but there should be a link for a vendor form. You want to fill out their form and pay their fees in advance if possible, so that they know to expect you, and make sure that you have enough tables and that sort of thing. So I think if you're coming to CoCo Fest, particularly if you're going to get a table, I think you should bring something. I mean, that's just my opinion. Bring a CoCo and show a project you've been working on. That seems obvious. If you haven't really been doing any projects, bring a CoCo and run your favorite game on it and just demonstrate that nostalgia or whatever. If you're someone who does a podcast or have a YouTube channel like Stevie, definitely bring promotional material, whether they're business cards or stickers or posters or drink coasters or whatever you got. I think that makes total sense. Come and lay them out on your table. And, I know Mike Rowan used to, and probably still will, bring he has some cards he's had printed up that were decorative or whatever, and he had some coffee mugs made with some CoCo themed stuff on them. That, of course, I'm sure that cost him a few bucks, but not an extravagant amount of money. But have them out there. You can sell them to other CoCo people. I know I enjoy having a cup of coffee every once in a while in a CoCo themed mug. It's kind of cool. Anyway, you don't have to bring anything. You don't have to get a table at all, certainly. But you can just come and hang out and walk around and do whatever. But if you are going to be there, I think it makes sense to bring some stuff and, just to entertain yourself. What do you think, Neil?
Definitely. The first few years I went, I didn't have a table and I was just walking around. But then I learned that having a table is so much nicer. And I actually did just what you said. I brought a CoCo 3 setup and I just demoed some games on it. Some of my favorite games, because at that time I didn't have any projects.
Yeah, and so it's cool. You can come. If you do, part of CoCo Fest is picking up some stuff from the auction or whatever, or what people have for sale. And it kind of sucks to buy a new CoCo game and not have a way to play it. So bring your CoCo, bring your smallest monitor that you, or at least maybe the biggest monitor that you don't mind carrying around. Whatever works for you. Come set them up, and you can play your game. If you do buy something new, you can try it out right then. Sometimes people, stuff that's made new for the CoCo is made by other people in the community, and maybe sometimes their directions aren't as clear as it needs to be, or maybe sometimes you just don't get something first try. And so if you just bought it and you can go 3 feet away to your table and plug it in and see if it works or not. If it doesn't work, maybe you can say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" Get it resolved right then. So I don't know. I think that makes sense. But like I said, even if you're not going to bring a CoCo, or whether you bring a CoCo or not, if you have some other thing, if you have a website or that you like to publish, I don't know, scans of CoCo hardware documentation or whatever you might have out there. If you're a web personality or something, sure, bring something. We've had people do other stuff too. We've had people come and bring T-shirts or whatever, some of which are CoCo oriented, some of which are not. Some people bring things that aren't really CoCo related at all. They have people who are artists people who do kind of different kinds of crafting or whatever. It's an opportunity for those things. I personally prefer to see a little more cocoa stuff than those, but it's your holiday, it's your weekend. Come and bring whatever you've got that is part of your persona. When you do bring stuff to CoCo Fest, I think you keep in mind that you should bring power cords as possible, certainly a power strip to plug in. And so at the very least, if you get a plug, that should be enough for you to plug everything else in. And then probably you want to bring some sort of extension cord as well, because sometimes the plugs aren't positioned exactly where we want them to be, right?
And the one thing I forgot to bring one year is duct tape. That really helps.
It is good to have some duct tape. Usually there's some around, but it's good to have it so you can set up your booth on your own terms. I'm going to say it's good to set up whatever you're going to set up. Do it at home on your kitchen table, so you know what it's really going to take, what extra pieces you need. If you need to throw an extra joystick in your bag or an extra power strip or that sort of stuff. At least you've already done it at home so that you have an idea of what you really need to bring. If there is something that you can't carry with you, if you really want to show your new CoCo game, but you can't figure out how to get a monitor packed into your bag to fly in through O'Hare, you need to talk to the organizers at Glenside or talk to somebody in advance. Say, hey, I need a monitor and I can't bring it. And whether it's a monitor or a joystick, if you do need something that you just can't bring yourself, you need to make those arrangements in advance, because you don't necessarily know what everyone else is going to have.
And in most cases, somebody can help out. If you're missing a monitor or a joystick or anything, usually somebody will have something extra, just especially if we know in advance.
Right. Well, they definitely usually can, but like I say, it's good to know it in advance. Now, as for when to arrive or when to depart, I think, in my opinion, it's best to get there. I don't know if it's really early, but to get there before dark on Friday, in my opinion. You roll in at 8 p.m. or something and you're tired and you have to get up in the next morning to come to the show floor or whatever. It's not really going to maximize your experience. You know what I mean? Whereas typically if you get there kind of mid-afternoon or whatever, a lot of times you can find some other CoCo people around and you can go and have dinner with people and, kind of start your CoCo weekend a little bit early. If you're really shy, you may want to try to make those arrangements in advance over the mailing list or a Facebook group. If you're a happy, friendly person, maybe you can just find somebody in the lobby to hang out with. I know our little group tends to have a dinner reservation nearby that we'd like to go to, and Joe Grubbs was there last year, and he kind of struck up a conversation with us, and he ended up going out to dinner with us. You know yourself, whether you're the kind of person that can strike up a friendship with a group of strangers and go have dinner, or if you need to make the arrangements in advance, whichever works for you. But I do advise that you get there early enough so that you can go and enjoy a little bit of relaxation on Friday night before the actual CoCo Fest events on Saturday. Now, when it comes to Sunday, the actual the event ends on Sunday at 5 p.m. And I think you're going to be heavily encouraged to be out of the venue by then. So then the question is, well, what do you do then? It's a bit late to start your travel after 5 for most people, though it kind of depends on how you got there and where you're going. For most years, I actually have, usually I've been driving, and I usually do take off Friday afternoon and try to get a head start on the trip home. But there were times in the past when particularly when I flew, that I ended up staying overnight, and some of those were really nice. events where I end up having a nice quiet dinner with a new CoCo friend on Sunday evening in a similar situation. You know, it's a great way to kind of extend your weekend a little bit. You know, make a new friend, enjoy your time a little bit, and extend your weekend a little bit. So whether or not you should stay over Sunday is kind of like I said, it's a bit of a judgment call. You know, if you can afford the extra night of stay and you're flying, I think it's probably better to fly Monday morning than Sunday evening. Maybe, I don't know, it depends on the airport. Going through O'Hare could be pretty busy on a Monday morning. I don't know. Maybe I'm not the best to comment there, but in terms of rushing around or whatever, I'm usually more prepared for a day's worth of travel in the morning than I am after a whole day of doing something else. If you're driving, of course, that's going to change your schedule accordingly, depending on how far you have to drive and when you need to do something else or where you need to be. But I don't know. Like I said, it's a bit of a judgment call. I will say, I think Neil and I are talking about driving this year together, and we've discussed staying overnight on Sunday. There are sometimes the Sunday night stragglers, I guess, have their own dinner. And I would imagine that Neil and I would probably join in on that to some degree. So it might be an extra opportunity for you to buy Neil and I a beer. I think that'd be a great opportunity for people. I might even let you buy me dinner if you're really nice to me. But seriously, I don't know. I can't tell you exactly what to do on the Sunday stay over Sunday bit, but I think it can be a great thing. It can make the weekend a little bit longer and a little bit more fun.
Yeah, it's nice to extend the trip. And last year, I got there really early. I was there Thursday night, and even then, there was still a couple. I saw some familiar faces. So there is people that get there early and leave late.
Well, that's cool. I will say, so the event, of course, is in Lombard, Illinois. This is a suburb of Chicago. It is by no means a small town. Certainly, plenty of modern conveniences around. That said, where the hotel is kind of near the highway. I don't know if there's really a grocery store particularly close by. There might be a drugstore on the corner or not too far away. But my point is, if you have a kind of a special need for, I don't know what, I mean, obviously you want to make sure you have whatever drugs you normally take for no prescriptions filled and that sort of thing, that like anytime you travel. But if you have to have a Snickers bar before bed or or whatever, you may want to throw a couple of extra ones in your bag to just make sure you've got them, because especially if you've never been before, you don't know what's around. You may want to throw your favorite snacks in the bag, or if you have special needs that for wake up or go to sleep procedure, or if you have special snacks you like to eat, or I don't know, if you're like me and you're from the South and you like to drink sweet iced tea, you may want to throw a bottled tea in the bag just so you have that little life preserver for when you can't find sweet tea in any of the restaurants. Although McDonald's usually has it these days.
Sweet iced tea, that's a big Canada thing too. That's what we have.
Oh, really? No,
yeah.
Well, that's cool.
It's a little random here, but the vending machines at this hotel are awesome. So if anybody's curious, I'm kind of a vending machine guy. I always check them out at every hotel I stay at, and it's pretty good.
Okay. Well, so I don't know if I've ever really used the vending machines at the hotel. The vending machines on the floor of the CoCo Fest, kind of so. Would you agree?
Yes, I do agree. But actually, at the hotel itself, they're excellent.
Yeah, so for those who haven't been, I should mention that the hotel is a Fairfield Inn, I guess. It's a pretty kind of standard, average American kind of roadside hotel or whatever. It's certainly not a 4-star hotel or any kind of place. There's no valet at the door or anything like that. But it's a pretty average, normal, clean, nice hotel.
Yeah.
But like I said, not super fancy. The convention center is a separate building. They share the same parking lot. It's not a long walk or anything like that. But it is a separate building. So there's a certain amount of separation from your hotel room when you're at the CoCo Fest. It's a little bit, like you say, it's just a little bit more than, it's not just next door. If you need to go back to your room, you need to walk across the parking lot and whatever else. So I doubt if that makes much of a difference, but it's worth mentioning. If you get out your Google Earth or Google Maps and look, you'll see that there's 2 buildings there. One more thing I wanted to mention, or maybe it's kind of 2 more things. There are at least 2 reasonably big airports in the Chicago area. In the Chicago O'Hare, of course, is a very large airport, and Chicago Midway. It looks like O'Hare is significantly closer to Lombard than Midway. It probably doesn't make a huge difference if you're driving. Use whichever airport seems more convenient to you, but O'Hare is a bit closer. If you're flying in and renting a car, probably makes fairly little difference. If you're not going to rent a car, it looks like there are ways. Well, obviously you could take a cab from either airport. If you don't want to take a cab, if you're going to rely on public transportation, it looks like there are combinations of subways and trains and buses to get you from either airport to Lombard. At least the train station, I think, is maybe a mile or 2 from the hotel. I'm not really advising this course, but if for some reason you have to take the public transportation to get to the fest venue, it looks like that you may have an easier time getting there from O'Hare than from Midway. The maps I was seeing, the public transportation from Midway seemed to take you back into downtown Chicago and then take you back out to Lombard, whereas coming from O'Hare, you seem to be a bit more direct. So anyway, if that's an issue for you, you may want to keep that in mind. I've gone to CoCo Fest a number of times, flying through O'Hare, renting a car, and driving out back when it was in Elgin. I've never done that to the new location in Lombard, but it's not a bad drive overall. It looks like Lombard's quite a bit closer, actually. So that is a reasonable strategy. Like say, renting a car. Taking a cab, of course, is not that big a deal. I checked, the hotel website says there are no shuttles to either airport. So you're going to have to figure out, if you don't want to rent a car, you're going to have to take a cab or figure out the public transportation. So what am I leaving out, Neil?
For those coffee drinkers out there, the hotel also serves coffee pretty much all day long, and it is excellent. If anybody's had a Tim Hortons coffee, it's very similar, and it's great.
Well, I hope I haven't said anything that scared anyone off. I think if you can make it to Midway Airport, I think you'll be able to figure out how to make it to to the hotel in Lombard. You might have to pay $20 to the Uber driver or whatever it costs, but I think you can make it there. Definitely want to see as many listeners there as possible. I'd love to meet a bunch of new people. Love to bring as many CoCo loving folks into the CoCo Fest fold as possible. I'm not sure what else to say. I definitely hope that, like I said, I hope we blow the doors off the place.
Yes, definitely. New faces and even old faces, people that we haven't seen in a while. Be nice to see you again.
Yep. Well, I mean, I heard Brother Jeremy is supposed to be making the trek, and I think I saw some talk from Curtis Boyle that he might be trying to come. I saw some talk from I think James Jones said he might be trying to come.
Well, that'd be awesome.
And so if we could just get Sockmaster, that'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Whoever else, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there.
There might be a sing-along this year then
That would be pretty cool.
Little jam session.
Yep. Okay. So the times for the CoCo Fest this year. On Saturday, the setup time starts at 7 a.m. The fest officially opens 9 a.m. and goes to 5 p.m., at which time we break for supper from 5 until 7 p.m. But then we have Saturday evening social time from 7 p.m. until 11:30 p.m. And I would predict that somewhere in there, someone will try to have a sing-along. For those interested, on Sunday there will be a worship service time at 8 a.m., followed by the fest starting at 9 a.m. and lasting until 3 p.m. We'll have a kind of closing down time and cleaning up time from 3 p.m. until 5 p.m. And then after 5 p.m., you will be strongly encouraged to evacuate the building.
And they're pretty serious about that.
Yeah. So anyway, like I said, after that, I suspect there'll be some dinner plans for the hangers-on that are still there after 5, still in the area. But that'll remain to be seen. If you're interested in such things, I encourage you to reach out on the mailing list or on the Facebook group as soon as possible. All right. Well, I think that probably wraps up our general advice on CoCo Fest logistics. I hope we haven't scared anyone off. I definitely hope to see as many people as possible. If there are questions that are still unanswered, please do reach out. There's feedback at cococrew.org or reach out to us on Twitter or through the Facebook group for the CoCo Crew Podcast. Anything else, Neil?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, we'll wrap that up. After these messages.
We'll be right back.
Okay. Welcome to this month's technical segment. This time we're going to be discussing the Tandy MC10, or Micro Color Computer 10. So the good news is this is the first of our technical segments that essentially is not about the architecture of the color computer, although it's about the architecture of a related machine. But anyway, it's a bit of a landmark moving on past the basic simple overviews of the machines that we love so much. All right, so we're talking about the MC10, the micro color computer. This machine had a collection of nicknames, and none of them, I think, really stuck. The Rainbow magazine seemed to try to use what it called the PoCo. PoCo was kind of a play on CoCo, which I think Rainbow had given the CoCo nickname to the world. But then PoCo, the Spanish word PoCo means small, so they took that and then capitalized the P and the C, so it looks like CoCo, but it's PoCo, so it's a small CoCo. Get it? Very funny. Also, I've seen Myco, capital M, little I, capital C, little O, which I guess is supposed to be micro color computer, so Myco, I can see that one. And then in a few letters to Rainbow, I saw somebody reference it as just MIC, M-I-C, all caps. So I guess that's the micro color as well. Anyway, I'm not sure any of those nicknames really stuck. So we'll just try to call it the MC10 for the most part. Anyway, so what is the MC10? Basically, it's a small machine, similar in some ways to the color computer. Comes from Tandy. It has the same graphics chip. It has not the same, but a similar or at least somewhat related CPU. And it has a version of BASIC that is somewhat similar, or very similar, to Color Basic. In addition to that, it is able to share some peripherals with the CoCo line. So there's a little introduction to the MC10. Moving on, we'll talk about some history of the MC10. The machine was originally released in November of 1983 at a price of $119.95. Roughly in that time, I think there's a lot of talk about some of these small machines that were coming out, like the ZX80 or the the ZX81 or the Timex Sinclair 1000 in the U.S. These were small, kind of minimal function machines that were being sold basically on their low price tags. So I guess Tandy perceived a demand for that kind of machine and went after it. They saw the first mention of a no-frills color computer coming in the Pipeline column of Rainbow magazine in June of 1983. And there was a little bit more info about it in the Pipeline column of Rainbow in July of 83, which included a few more details about the machine. Interestingly, also in a corner of Rainbow magazine where it says your magazine dedicated to the Tandy color computer and the TDP 100 and the Dragon 32 or blah blah blah. In July of 83, it added the MC10 to that little group. Shows a certain amount of interest or dedication, I guess. There wasn't a real good review. I think they'd just gotten it in hands in time for their July of 83 issue at the Rainbow. But in August of 83, there was a more in-depth technical review, an article entitled Kid CoCo is No Lightweight. It covered a lot of information about the machine. It did state in there that there was no cloadem or exec commands, which is not really true. They're not documented, but they are there. There's a statement in that article about the built-in serial port hardware in the 6803 processor being used for the serial port in the MC10, which I guess was just wishful thinking, because it's not even wishful, it just would make sense, but it's not the case, so they were wrong about that. Anyway, the introduction of this machine late in 83 just was kind of untimely. You may have heard of the great video game crash of 83, which I think maybe not everyone agrees, but along with video games, I think it kind of was affecting the computer market, or maybe the computer market was digging into the video game market, or vice versa. Anyway, it was an industry problem in 83. Along with that, we're starting to see price wars with the Commodore and TI-99 going at each other. TI-99 and the VIC-20 prices falling through the floor. And whatever you think of those machines, they're probably more capable machines than the MC10. And by the time it was all over with, they were much cheaper than the MC10. So it's not really surprising that the MC10 was discontinued within a year of its introduction. In the October 83 issue of Creative Computing, there was an article that reviews the MC10 with the title "Too Little, Too Late for Too Much?" ? And I think that's probably sums it up pretty nicely. There is a quote in Boise and Bill's book, CoCo, the story of the underdog computer or whatever. In chapter 5, I think it is, there's some talk of the MC10, and there's a quote in there from Dale Chatham. It says, "We didn't put a lot of work into the development of the product, and I guess it showed in the lack of success." At least in the lack of success. Yes, I think that's probably true. Anyway, it'd be easy to hate on this machine and whatever. I've been taking some time to play with it recently as part of a Retro Challenge project, and I actually still, for some reason, kind of like it. I don't know if it's just because it's so strange, but it's a fun little machine to play with, so I'll try not to judge it too harshly, despite the glaring design, well, if not errors, definitely questionable design points. Anyway, there was a clone of the MC10 called the Matra Alice. This was a machine sold in France, which is essentially the same machine, except that instead of the NTSC RF box, it was replaced with a PAL conversion circuit, or really a SCART conversion circuit. It was had a SCART or Paratel connector for interfacing to TVs, well, in France or in much of Europe, really. I wonder how much that circuit matches the circuit on my French CoCo with the Paratel or SCART connector on there. I'd be curious to see. Anyway, I understand the Matrode was a relatively popular machine in comparison to the MC10, and it's survived. So basically the same machine with a very striking red case. Even had a matching cassette player available in the same red color. And there were some follow-ons to the Alice. There was the Alice 32, which was a similar machine, but they replaced the 6847 with a different video chip called the EF9345, which is similar in some ways and different in others, of course. And of course they expanded memory on the Alice 32, both for the main CPU, and I think that chip uses video specific memory. And then later there was an Alice 90, which was a follow-on to the Alice 32, which basically was a slightly bigger machine with a full keyboard, and apparently it actually had a video input so that you could overlay graphics from the Alice 90 onto your video output. So, that's I guess you could do video titling with it. It's pretty cool. I saw one on eBay not long ago, but I guess I just mostly missed it. I probably wasn't as interested then as I would be now. So I kind of regret that. But anyway, I'll be looking for Alice machines now, I suppose. As far as peripherals and software that was available for the MC10, there was the main peripheral available was a 16K memory expansion. This was well, it looks like a brick. It just plugs into the back of the case. It sticks up like a fin. I know it's like a 50s automobile or something like that. It's kind of ridiculous looking. If you watch any of my Retro Challenge videos, you see a little thing blocking a corner of the screen in the videos. That's it, the memory expansion. That was all that was produced by Tandy in terms of expansion, at least for that port, which theoretically could do a lot more. We'll cover that, I guess, a little bit later. Sold as printers, well, I always think of there was the TP10, the thermal printer 10, which, just that 10 on the end probably kind of suggests a connection with the MC10. They were both about the same size. They came out at the same time. I think they were introduced in the same RSC10 Radio Shack catalog. The TP10 actually is just a serial port printer. It could work with the CoCo easily as well. But it's, like I said, it seems to have an association in people's minds with the MC10. I always think of the CGP 115 as being paired a bit with the MC10 because it was also a small printer. But it was actually out before the MC10 was introduced. So I don't know if maybe that was just my local Radio Shack was putting them together and made me think of them as being kind of paired or what. But anyway, in reality, any CoCo printer, serial printer, could work with the MC10. The CoCo and the MC10 both have that sort of strange 4-pin serial port. Any machine that had that for the CoCo could also work with the MC10. There is Tandy had a little line of portable cassette recorders that they labeled as computer cassette recorders, and one of them is the CCR 82. If you look at it, it's scaled down. It fits the size or whatever of the MC10 really well, and has the same kind of beige color. I don't know if it was intentional to put them together, but it sure seems like they had made something that's a bit more portable that could go along with the not quite portable MC10. Certainly a lot lighter to carry around if not truly portable. The cassette interface is the same as on the CoCo, and basically any cassette recorder would work, but it seems like maybe they made that one with the intent that people would associate them and buy them together. There was some commercial software available through Radio Shack. I think there were just these 5 packages. There was a Microcolor Compact, which was a communications program for like accessing a BBS or CompuServe or Dow Jones or whatever. There was Lost World Pinball, which is sort of a pinball simulation game. It's not bad. I was playing that earlier today. There's Micro Checkers, which of course is a checkers game. There's one called Micro Games, which is a collection of 4 or 5 mini games. I haven't really played that much. Probably nothing to write home about, but there are some games there. And then there's one called Micro Math Design, which is a couple of programs. One that turns the MC10 into like a little calculator, and then one that can generate spiral graphics, kind of like a spirograph or something. I don't know. It's I guess it's a product of the time, but might be kind of interesting if you're into that sort of stuff. There was a book by William Barden Jr., who of course had a number of CoCo books that had already been released, called the TRS-80 Color Computer Programs, and it's just a collection of type-in programs to take advantage of the CoCo. And I guess there was a re-release of it because the basics are pretty similar, and of course the video hardware is similar. There's a re-release of that book where it's been retitled the TRS-80 Color Computer and MC10 Programs by William Barden. I'm not sure how much difference there is on the inside. Might be worth looking at the two editions side by side, but it tells you kind of where the people's mindset is, that the basics are pretty similar. This is sort of, this is continued to this day with Jim Gary. He does porting to, I think usually to the MC10, and then from there to the CoCo, sometimes to the CoCo, and then to the MC10. There's definitely some similarities between the basics. They're not identical, but you can do a lot of porting between them without a lot of effort. Anyway, I think that's probably a decent little overview, and I'll be back in a moment to talk about some of the features of the MC10.
Hi, I'm Kevin Savitz of Antic, the Atari 8-Bit Podcast. You're listening to the CoCo Crew. When you're ready to play with a real computer, play with an Atari.
All right, let's talk about some of the hardware features of the MC10. The machine itself is based around a Motorola 6803 processor. The 6803 is it's derived from the original Motorola 6800 CPU. It's actually derived by way of the 6801 microcontroller, which is a relatively flexible device with a lot of options. But the 6803 is a somewhat less flexible device. The 6801 has a built-in ROM, which I assume you probably could get customized, and then there was a debugger program in there, a ROM monitor called Little Bug or something like that, that probably was standard. And then it had a number of variations in the way the hardware worked that you could select by how you wired the machine at boot up. And you could boot up and use the internal ROM or not. You could use external ROM or internal ROM. You could use the different ports either as part of an address bus or as I/O ports to the outside, that sort of thing. The lack of an internal ROM kind of limited the usefulness of most of those modes. So in the 6803, you basically are acting as a 6801 in mode 2. I think maybe you could put it into mode 3 as well if you wanted to turn off some of the internal RAM. The 6801 has 128 bytes of internal RAM mapped from offset 128 to offset 255. The 6803 also has this. You could turn it off, is my understanding from reading some books about the hardware. Not sure why you'd want to, but if you do, there it is. I suspect that maybe the 6803s, at least some of them, were originally 6801s that had flaws that were isolated to the ROM. So you could still use the main hardware, but not the ROM itself. This is probably a good way to get rid of some dies produced for the 6801 that maybe had failed quality assurance. That's just my speculation, but I'd bet pretty decent money on it. Anyway, as I said, the 6803 and 6801 are derived from the 6800 processor. They have basically the same instruction set as the 6800 plus an extra 11 instructions. There's a push and a pull of the X register, which is helpful for data manipulation, especially involving the 16-bit registers. They also have an instruction that's add the B accumulator to the X register, so that's an easy way to do some adjustments of where the index register is pointing. There's a number of instructions related to a D register, which is really a 16-bit concatenation of the 8-bit A and B registers. So there's a load D, store D, an add D, subtract D, and then they have shifts, ASL or arithmetic shift left D and a logical shift right D, which is kind of cool because I'm not sure the 6809 even has those. So with 6809, you shift one register, you'd like shift through B and then shift in, rotate. You have to do a shift and rotate combination to go through the full 16 bits. Anyway, it's a cool feature. The two more instructions. There is a multiply instruction that I believe works similar to the 6809, where you multiply A times B and the result ends up in D. And then there's a branch never instruction, which sounds kind of useless to me. But I mean, it's not entirely useless. You can use it as a slightly longer NOP or no op. It takes an extra cycle. And then apparently you can, if you really want to be tricky, you can do a branch never with an actual offset, and the offset could actually be the opcode for a different instruction. And so depending on where you hit the beginning of your function, if you hit the branch never, then it's a no op, but then you could jump back to one address past that, which would be your offset, which now is actually a opcode. And so you'd slightly modify your program depending on where you enter the stream. That's some crazy stuff. It's not once you get to doing crazy stuff like that, you're not too far from self-modifying code and other paths to insanity. Anyway, so it's the 6803 has these extra instructions. The fact that they have all those ways to manipulate the 16-bit D register makes it a lot easier for when you're porting 6809 code back. You don't have to do a lot of multi-byte math or whatever with the weird stack operations and that sort of thing. So that's nice. And the manipulations for the X register are a bit nicer, although nowhere near as nice as what's available on the 6809. Other hardware features available. There is support for a serial port built into the chip. You dedicate a couple of pins to the serial transmit and receive. And there's a lot of variations. I think certainly asynchronous serial ports, and I think maybe you can do some synchronous stuff. And we'll see what other kind of crazy stuff can you do. But it doesn't matter because on the MC10, they didn't connect those pins to the serial port. Why? I don't know. I had some speculation. Maybe I'll talk about that a little later, but I don't think that was right either. So anyway, even though the chip itself has serial support built in, it's unused, so it might as well not be there. You could probably cause some crazy stuff to happen by turning it on inside the chip, or maybe nothing to happen at all, or just do you no good except crash the machine. There is, however, an onboard timer that's part of the internals of the CPU that actually can be used and is pretty useful as a kind of a source of real-time information. Especially it's a counter that gets incremented by the clock ticking away, and so you can count how long it takes for something to happen. Well, basically it's to let you set a timer to expire at a certain time. There are modes where you can count events on certain pins or whatever. I don't think any of them are mapped in any way that makes them useful for that on the MC10. Sadly, they could have tied the speaker output to one of the pins, and you could have driven the speaker with the timer, but that doesn't seem to have been something they wanted to do either. I have to wonder if whoever designed machine the actually even knew that the 6803 could do these things. But anyway, moving on, the other main chip in the MC10 is the 6847 video display generator. This is essentially the same. Well, essentially, it is the same video chip that's in the CoCo. Now, before I move on, I'll say there is no SAM, or synchronous address multiplexer, which was a 6883. There is none of that in the MC10, so you just have the VDG married directly to the CPU. Because of that, the VDG actually is driving frame buffer addresses directly into the memory itself, which means that the frame buffer address is fixed. Also, there is no, while there is the SemiGraphics 4 and 6 that are built into the chip, there is no SemiGraphics 8, 12, or 24 as on the CoCo. One other thing, because there's no SAM, there is a separate video interleave circuit implemented on the motherboard to kind of keep the CPU and the VDG out of each other's way. However, that circuit does not connect out to the expansion bus, which means that you can't, well, basically means the expansion bus memory is not available to the VDG. There are a couple of instances where the control lines for the VDG are connected to the incoming data lines. This is for the alphanumeric versus semigraphics modes, and for the invert lines. This is done just like on the CoCo, so your lowercase letters will appear with the dark background instead of the light background. And of course you can have your semigraphics mixed with text just by having a character with a high bit set. So basically you could use the same data to the screen as you use on the CoCo to get the same result on the MC10. The 812 line, the high address line that would enable access to more than 4K of memory on the VDG is not connected on the MC10. So because of that, you can't access more than 4K of memory, so you can't use, effectively you can't use the 6K graphics modes. That's the CG6 and RG6. That's not entirely true. You can turn them on. You just get a repeat like 2/3 of the way down the screen. Maybe if you're really clever, you can find a way to take advantage of that effect and only play in the middle third of the screen or something like that. Also, because of the lack of CG or RG6. That means that you're not going to get any NTSC artifact colors. Also, probably because don't have the special circuit that the CoCo 2 had to turn on the color burst for that. But either way, it's not going to happen on the MC10. So, but otherwise, you do have all the same video modes as on the CoCo. So you get the the RG3, CG3. And then so there's the 128 by 190 or by 96 and by 4 color modes. You get the color set select is in there, so you can get either the yellow, red, yellow, green, blue color set, or the buff, cyan, magenta, orange color set. In the text modes, you can go between the green colors and the red colors. It's definitely a very familiar experience to the CoCo in terms of the graphics. You even have the somewhat busted SG6 mode, which is you don't get access to the full color set in SG6 because of the way the data lines are connected into the control lines for the 6847. But you can turn them on and use them to some extent. Let's see. Let's talk about the external ports on the MC10. There is a 34-pin card edge connector for bus expansion, which is a little weird on the MC10. It's the card edge on the back of the MC10, and so anything you want to plug into it has to have the connector itself. This is a fully mapped, I don't know about fully mapped, but it definitely has a wide range of signals available for data and address access. You could put, obviously you can expand your memory through this port, but you could also put other kind of memory mapped peripherals out there. Let's see, looking at the signals now, that's about all you've got. You have a reset and an NMI, which is a non-maskable interrupt line. So you could put a piece of hardware on the bus that interrupts the CPU, albeit with the NMI signal instead of an IRQ. There is a pin to disable internal device selection, so if you wanted to change the memory map from the add-on device, you could do that. And well, you get a clock signal, a reset signal. That's about it. So mostly you could put memory out there. You could put memory map peripherals out there. I don't think anybody did that. Tandy certainly didn't. I've heard that maybe the Alice people had some kind of, maybe a robot arm or something like that plugged into the back of the Alice that, obviously would have to have some kind of, something like a 6821 or similar chip out there to receive those writes. But anyway, the VDG does not connect out, its circuit for accessing memory does not connect to this bus connector. So even though you've added on you expand the memory or whatever, you still can't get the 6K modes on the VDG. Why they did that, I do not know, but that's the way it is. And the connector thing is kind of weird too, but I guess they really only plan for the one memory device, so I guess it doesn't really matter whether you pay for the connector on the memory device, and it makes the computer itself that extra 50 cents cheaper or something. Who knows? There is a 4-pin CoCo compatible serial port. Like I said, for whatever reason, they did not connect the serial pins that are part of the microcontroller out to this port. So instead, they have it bit banged just like on the CoCo. It makes no sense to me why they did that, other than maybe somebody already had some code written. I don't know. It seems silly. The other port on the back is the cassette port. That's the same Tandy standard cassette port that's on the CoCo, and I think it's on the Model 100. And I don't know about the Model 100, but the Model 1, the Model 3, all that stuff. Same port. But it is a little strange in that one of the pins on that cassette connector is for the remote control. So basically it can turn the motor on and off on the cassette port. For whatever reason, you can't do that. There's no relay inside the MC10 to do that. So, congratulations. They saved that extra 3 cents when building the MC10. And so you have to manage the play and stop on your own. And again, it doesn't make any sense to me why they didn't connect the pin from the timer out to the speaker, so at least you could handle the speaker, kind of in an asynchronous fashion. But they didn't. They do, however, have a ROM call for sending tones out if you want to do that, but it doesn't return or anything. Or at least until the tone is done. But it's really not all that complicated. But anyway, that's a little overview of the hardware on the MC10, and I'll be back in a minute to talk a little bit about the basic on the MC10 and maybe conclude and wrap this up. I'm in love with the CoCo. Okay, let's talk about the basic programming environment available on the MC10. So basically, when you reboot the MC10, it comes out to something called Microcolor Basic. If you are familiar with the Color Computer or the Dragon, particularly in the non-extended basic modes, then you'll be right at home. It is a Microsoft-inspired or Microsoft-provided basic. Very, very much familiar. It's essentially Color Basic with some bits of extended Color Basic kind of welded on. There's some math functions and and maybe a few other things here and there. One thing that's a little bit new on the keyboard itself, there's a control key, and then there's stencils around it with all the basic, or most at least of the basic keywords stenciled on there. So you can get basically one or probably two. You got to hold the control key down, and so 2-finger typing for the various keywords. I don't know how useful that is, but some people probably thought it was cool and avoid a little typing once they figured out where all the keywords were on the keyboard. And I think this was probably inspired by the ZX, the Sinclair devices, the ZX80, ZX81, or Timex Sinclair 1000. The ZX Spectrum does that as well. I don't know. It probably depends on what you're used to. It always seemed a little strange to me, but it's okay. There are a couple of new commands that I haven't seen in other versions of Extended Basic or Color Basic. There's a C-save splat or star and a C-load splat. And what this is the versions of C-save and C-load that save and restore memory directly to or from arrays in BASIC. So rather than having to do the kind of open and close and whatever that you'd have to do in regular Extended Color Basic, you can just basically do a C-save splat on like the A array and the C-load splat later to restore it or something like that. I haven't written any basic code to use it, but that's my understanding of how they work. I can see where that might be useful, although I can't really provide an example right now, but maybe you can see it. So even though the basic environments are similar, the tokens used inside of BASIC are different between Color Basic and the MC10. This is similar how the tokens also differ between the CoCo and the Dragon. So what I mean is when you go and type your BASIC program into memory, it does what's called tokenization, and so it'll look through and it'll find a keyword. So like, so you're doing a loop, it'll find the keyword for, F-O-R, and it'll look up and there's a number that corresponds to that, and I don't know what the number is, but let's say it's 65. And so instead of recording 4 for the program, it'll change it to 65, and then it'll move on from there, and does that for most keywords. And then so if you actually look in memory, instead of seeing your program text, you'll have a combination of these tokens and then some of the information for like strings you've typed in and whatever. So whatever, but the tokens that are used in the MC10 are different than the tokens that are used on the CoCo or the Dragon, and so you just have to live with it. Even if the programs are exactly the same on the two machines, you can't directly C-save and C-load, C-save for one and C-load on the other. Now, so we get around this on the CoCo versus Dragon situation, because I think you can do a C-save with an ASCII option on the CoCo, and it will actually save it as the text of the same text of the basic program as what you see when you list it. And then when you read it in, the machine at the other side will tokenize it on input, and that'll work fine. But I think maybe the MC10 does not have an ASCII option for its C-save, and so there's nothing there. In the October 1983 issue of Rainbow, there's an article that says Opening CoCo's Library to the MC10. In there, there's a program that does the token changing between the CoCo and MC10. So, if you have a CoCo program you'd like to run on the MC10 or vice versa, and you don't want to have to retype the whole program, so that may be an option for you. Anyway, so there is no C-save-M command on the MC10. That's a little weird if you ask me. There is, however, a C-load-M command and exec, so you can load machine language programs on the MC10 and execute them. And in fact, some of the ones provided by Tandy were C-load-M and exec. I know Compaq and Lost World Pinball were that way, and maybe some of the others too. So why did they not include C-save-M? I have no clue. But in fact, just this week, I think it was Barry Nelson. I think we mentioned this in the news that he posted a program that you could run that would do the equivalent of CSaveM from a basic program. That probably would work for a lot of people. I think probably also if you can get the MC10 assembly language program into memory on a CoCo, I think you can do the CSaveM on the CoCo and then load it on the MC10. Kind of a pain in the butt, but I think that you can do that. I don't know. Who knows? What were they thinking? I'm not convinced they were doing a lot of thinking at all with this machine. Anyway, along those same lines, on the CoCo, there's a timer. Well, it's a kind of a command. I guess it's really like a function, although when you access it, it seems more like a variable. But anyway, it returns a count that corresponds to a clock tick. And you can use it to time things in BASIC on the CoCo. If you want something to put up a menu for 5 seconds, and you can use timer and some offset, and it'll wait the amount of time. Now, in the CoCo, there is no timing hardware at all. It just counts VSync interrupts and maintains its timer that way. On the MC10, there is a timer. There actually is hardware that can do timing, and they don't use it. And so there is no timer command, as far as I can tell, in the MC10 BASIC. Why? I don't know. At some point, on these design decisions on the MC10, you just have to stop asking why and just accept it. Also, along those lines, there's a number of, just like in CoCo, in the BASIC on the CoCo, there's a number of places in the interpreter that have RAM hooks, and these are places in the machine code that will look out and see if there is a jump specified, so that you can take control of certain pieces of the interpreter and do different things. You can control the input, so you can input from a different device, that sort of thing. You can take control of interrupts, so that the actual interrupt vectors are in ROM, but then they point out to RAM so that you get a double hop, but you could at least you can be the person responding to the interrupts when they happen instead of just whatever is in ROM. That's great. But for whatever reason, they'd put these in the MC10 starting 512 bytes into the memory. So the RAM, of course, the beginning of RAM is also the beginning of the video screen. 512 bytes represents the end of the text screen, but if you put it in a graphics mode, 512 bytes will be, in the middle of the graphics screen. And so if you want to do any kind of high-res graphics and also make use of any of these hooks, particularly for interrupts, you're going to have this artifact on the screen. And I don't mean like an NTSC color artifact. I mean like a thing on the screen that's part of the picture that is like, why is that part of the picture there? Now, if you're a clever artistic person, maybe you can build up something around it so that it doesn't look out of place, but it's a pain in the butt to have to do that. So considering that they walled off everything past 3K as being inaccessible to the video display anyway, one would think that would have been a better place to put all these RAM hooks, or maybe at the very end of the 4K behind the stack or something like that. But I don't know. I can't go back and change it now. It's just 30 years too late, I guess, but whatever. Just one more in the list of what were they thinking kind of questions for the MC10 designers. Anyway, well, that's enough about BASIC on the MC10. I think I can sort of just go on and try to wrap this up a bit. So in conclusion, what we have with the MC10, I remember when it came out, I thought it was kind of a cool little machine, but I wasn't quite sure. I mean, is it a color computer? Is it not? Well, it has a different processor, so you can't run the same programs on it, and at least not the same machine language programs. Maybe you can run some of the same basic programs on it, but you can't load them. I don't know. It was very confused marketing for me when I was 12 when it came out. I did have a friend who later acquired one. I don't think he did very much with it, but I think a lot of CoCo folks are in that same category of, well, we knew this machine was out there. We didn't really know why it was out there or what it was good for. I hope that if you're like me and we're in that position now, you know a little bit more about the MC10. I don't know that my description will make you want to do much with it, but you know, it's, well, whatever. I've kind of described it here in my notes as a computer that was fit for the aisle of misfit toys. So if you're in the U.S., every year around Christmas, they run these specials, I think on ABC, and one of them's called Santa Claus is Coming to Town, or no, that's the one for Rudolph, I guess. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and Rudolph gets picked on by his friends for his shiny nose, and he goes and runs off and ends up at this island of misfit toys where it's like, you know, one of the main ones is it's a Jack in the Box, except his name's not Jack, he's Charlie in the Box, and there's all these toys that just aren't quite right. And so it seems like maybe the MC10 should, if they did an 80s version of Rudolph, whereas in Santa's Workshop there'd be the regular CoCos or the Apples or the Ataris or whatever. Out of the island of misfit toys, there'd be a color or an MC10 on the desk. But anyway, like those misfit toys, I'd say the MC10 actually is a fairly capable machine. The 6803 processor, you know, it has some guts. It can do some things. It's been fun to program. I've been working on porting Xmas Rush from the CoCo over to the MC10. You can do some cool stuff with it. And I read an article in Rainbow as part of this research, and it indicated that BASIC might actually be slightly faster on the MC10 than on the CoCo. I'll leave that to someone else to do the testing. I'd say it's believable. At least, you know, with the CoCo in the 0.89 megahertz mode, just like the 6803. Anyway, I'd say there's plenty of bang for the buck to have been had at the $119, $120 price range back in the day. It's not a bad little machine. You can produce fairly decent graphics compared to, say, the ZX81 Timex Sinclair 1000. Certainly a lot better graphics than that, and a lot better keyboard, in my opinion. But in the end, still kind of an underpowered machine, and definitely a lot of questionable design choices, like really questionable. Like, oh my God, what were you thinking kind of questionable. Still, if you're a retro hacker and you're looking to plow a kind of a green field, a machine that has not seen a lot of action but maybe could do some cool stuff, maybe the MC10 is for you. So if you see one on eBay, or you find one, especially if you find one in the local thrift shop or whatever, save it, pick it up, keep it out of the landfill, write some code for it, do some cool stuff, send it to the Yahoo MC10 group, and you know, let's have some fun. Okay, well, thanks for listening to me ramble, and I don't know what we'll talk about next month, but there'll be something. Okay, so I'm going to turn you over now to I guess to Neil for a game review. I wonder what he'll be doing this time. Take care.
Let the Radio Shack TRS-80 put the world of color computing into your home. Instant loading program packs turn any color TV into an exciting game arcade.
Welcome back to the Games Corner. This is the first episode for the new year, and just for this, I saved a special game to review to kick off 2016 in style. And this game is called Farfall. What makes it even cooler is that Farfall is coded by our very own host of this podcast, John Linville. Now, before any of you say or think I'm doing this review to score extra points with John, well, that is definitely not the case. In all fairness, I started following John's Farfall blog before I even really knew John. At this point, I had only met him once briefly at the first CoCo Fest I attended back in 2011. Alright, on to the game. Farfall is an arcade-style action platform game. It was inspired by the homebrew game on the Atari Jaguar game console called Downfall. The object of the game is to always stay on a platform and not fall off the bottom or get squished at the top. When the game starts, your character is falling down on the screen, and you must land on a platform immediately. The platforms are always in random spots and move toward the top of the screen. It sounds easy, but it is very challenging. You only get one life. The longer you ride the platforms, the higher your score gets, and the longer you play, it speeds up and the platforms will change color, making it harder to see them. It's a very simple game, but yet very addicting. Farfall is strictly for the Color Computer 1 and 2 only. It was coded to take advantage of a special SG-12 semi-graphics mode that is not compatible with the Color Computer 3. This inspired me to dig out my Color Computer 1 and get it set up again. The Farfall cartridge lives in slot 1 on the multi-pack. Because it uses this special graphics mode, it looks amazing. It's night and day from the normal Color Computer 1 and 2 games that use standard modes. I can't get over how many colors are displayed at once, with full animation and music playing in the background all at the same time. I also find the Farfall tune very catchy. You can hear a rendition of it at the end of each of our show that Mike Rowan made for us. I won't go into any more technical detail on this game, but maybe someday we can get lucky and have John do a tech segment on it. Then just when things seem like they can't get any better, John decides to make a professional custom arcade joystick made just for Farfall. I had the chance to try it out at CoCo Fest 2012. Ever since then, I was even more hooked on this game. From that moment, I knew someday I would like to build a joystick at least close to that for use with Farfall. So with the help of John drawing out a schematic for me last year, I was able to build one. I didn't have a nice chassis for it, but I used an old wooden cassette crate I had. It turned out pretty well, and I was demoing it at CoCo Fest last year. I blame my inspiration to build this joystick on Farfall. Sure, the joystick works with other CoCo games, but it was Farfall that pushed me to do the project. Some other cool factoids about Farfall is that it was the first homebrew CoCo game to be released on a ROM cartridge. The last game released on a cartridge for the CoCo was at least a decade or two ago. It was also the first to be released with homemade plastic cartridges made from plastic resin and molds, something else John was learning and experimenting with last year. The first batch of Farfall game cartridges that were sold all came in the homemade cartridge shells. Another tidbit, did you know that Farfall is an award-winning game? It won the 2012 Retro Challenge Winter Warm-Up, so that officially makes it an award-winning game. So, I've talked you into wanting to buy a copy of Farfall? Well, currently it is sold out and there's a waiting list. However, the good news is that in the near future they will be for sale again. This is because of a joint venture between Boise Pete, Mike Rowan, and John Linville that have created the Super Pack. The Super Pack is a brand new genuine CoCo cartridge shell. These are professionally made and not 3D printed. We can thank these three guys for bringing this item to the CoCo community for all of us. It will not only help getting Farfall back into production, but it will also help anyone with other projects they want to get off the ground. For more information on the game Farfall, please check out the Farfall blog site. I will make sure the link is in the show notes. It is an amazing blog, and not only do you learn about the game, but you learn a huge amount of information on the CoCo. Definitely one of the best blogs I've ever read. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Games Corner. Until next month, happy CoCo gaming. Hey, do you have your Farfall cartridge yet? Well, it's that time again. We have reached the end of episode 8. I think we ran a little over again this month. It's hard not to with all these great projects and happenings going on in the CoCo community. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please keep your feedback coming in. We'd love to hear from you. I would like to thank my host John Linville for providing the MC10 tech segment. I have to say, with all this MC10 talk, I'm definitely convinced to buy one now. Hopefully one will show up at CoCo Fest. We also would like to thank all of you for listening. You are the most important part of the show. If we didn't have you tuning in, there'd be no point in making this podcast. Stay tuned for next month's show, and until then, happy CoCoing.